Hello and welcome to And the Runner-Up Is. This week on the show, we're talking the 2001 Best Actress race at the Academy Awards, where Halle Berry won for her performance in Monsters Ball. But why did she beat fellow nominees Judi Dench, Nicole Kidman, Sissy Spacek, and Renée Zellweger? We'll explore all this and more today on And the Runner-Up Is. Hello and welcome back to And the Runner-Up Is. I'm your host, Kevin Jacobson, here to talk about the 74th year of Best Actress at the Oscars, which cover the films of 2001. We'll be discussing how Halle Berry won, why the losers lost, and who we think was the runner-up of this Best Actress race. And my guest today is a playwright whose work has been featured at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, winner of 5 Michael Caine Kennedy Center Playwright Awards. Welcome to the show, Isaiah Reaves.
Hello, everyone.
So excited to have you on to talk about a pretty monumental year of Best Actress.
Absolutely. This year is huge. And when I thought of my dream episode, like what episode would I most want to hear, this would be the one because what a crazy lineup, what a crazy year.
Yeah, very much so. And an iconic winner. So before we talk 2001, Isaiah, let's talk Best Actress overall as a category, as I ask every guest. My first question for you, what would you say is your favorite Best Actress win of all time?
This is hard for me. It changes between two. I love Charlize Theron in Monster. I mean, wow, what transformative work. Like, to me, that's what the category represents. That's the best of the best to me. And that movie's so good. I don't really hear people talking about that win as much as I would like, beyond the physical transformation. She's really doing complex work there. And I think, of course, we all have to say Vivian Lee, right? In Gone with the Wind.
We do.
That's the moviest movie that's ever movied. And it is racist, and I am Black. So people were like, why do you like this movie? I love Gone with the Wind. I love Vivian Lee. And I can acknowledge its problems while also being like, she did that.
Yes. And to that point, the movieest movie to ever movie, that is the actress to ever actress in that particular role. It is a defining role that is like the pinnacle, of what any actress would want to do. So, yeah, can't argue with that. And I'm very excited to also get to Charlize Theron in a few weeks, actually, because there's a lot that I feel like that is kind of kicking off a bit of that plus Nicole Kidman in The Hour is kind of kicking off like this transformation trend in Best Actress that we will see pretty much moving forward almost every single year. There's going to be something like that. So that will be very exciting. But my other question for you, many heartbreaking losses in this category, as you know, over the years. But what would you say is your favorite or most heartbreaking loss in this category?
Ooh, I have to go with one from my lifetime, right? Because
Sure.
I'm 26, so I'm a baby relative to these things. So I could pull out Diana Ross and say Lady Sings the
Mm.
Blues is a heartbreaking loss. I'm gonna say that when Andra Day and Viola Davis lost to Frances McDormand for whatever that was, no shade. I was
Not
really,
this
really
Nomadland shade.
I was really, really heartbroken. I thought that
Yeah.
both women, especially Andra Day, did incredible work. And as we're going to talk about later, it's like, when do Black women get these opportunities to be here again? it was just so monumental what Andre Day did, and the transformation of Viola Davis was awe-inspiring. And yeah, I was a little sad about that whole year. There was a lot. That was 2020, I believe. There was a lot going on there. So
Yeah,
just a big mess all around, but we move on.
right. Yeah, no, that was such a chaotic Best Actress year, as I'm sure you remember. Everyone got a different precursor. Nobody knew who was going to win the Oscar. And for as much as I really like Frances's performance in Nomadland, it is glaring to look at that. Her getting her third Best Actress and, Andra putting in that all of that work to play Billie Holiday and Viola Davis too, for that matter, in Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. It's yeah, quite a few missed opportunities, perhaps, and even like Frances, she doesn't care. Like she doesn't like you see her accepting the award. It's like that's great, but I have several awards. Don't mean that much to me. And then you think of what that could have meant for Viola or Andra or Carey Mulligan or Vanessa Kirby, and
Oh yeah, even Vanessa Kirby and Carey Mulligan, I thought really deserved to win. So that's a weird year for me, and it was very emotional. It was the one time where I was like, "Do I like the Oscars?" And then was like, "Stop being fake." Yes, you do. Even if it's a win you don't like, it's always interesting.
Yes, we always have moments that test us as Oscar watchers. As I'm sure everyone already knows me blabbering on about Glenn Close. I could attest to that. But
Of
anyway,
course.
yes, that's not what we're here to talk about. We're here to talk about 2001. All right, so let's talk about this year at the Oscars, the 74th Academy Awards. The nominees were Halle Berry in Monsters Ball, Judi Dench in Iris, Nicole Kidman in Moulin Rouge, Sissy Spacek in the Bedroom, and Renée Zellweger in Bridget Jones's Diary, with the winner being Miss Halle Berry. So before we break down these performances individually, would love to know your overall thoughts on this lineup and from watching or rewatching these.
This is a really strong lineup. I think one of the better lineups of the 21st century, in my humble
Mm-hmm.
opinion. I think there's not a bad or garbage performance in the mix at all, And I think what's really interesting about this lineup is thank God Renee Zellweger and Nicole Kidman and their movies are here because if not, this would just be sad on top of sadder on top of saddest.
Bleak.
Like,
Yeah.
very, very, very depressing, dark material balanced out by this light material that's also complex in its own way, which is what I think a good Best Actress lineup is a spectrum of different actresses at different stages of their careers doing different things.
Yeah, that's very well said. I think this is a very fun lineup. All these actresses I personally just enjoy watching. It is another group of films or nominees where the films themselves are so different, very, very different in their style, their ambition, their goals, everything. And I feel like we have a lot of like swinging for the fences type of performances here. Like Nicole Kidman fully committing herself to Baz Luhrmann's insane vision, Renee Zellweger playing British and kind of nailing it, Sissy Spacek, Halle Berry having these huge dramatic turns, monologues, challenging themselves and kind of their public image too, and Judi Dench getting to a very vulnerable place in her film too. So yeah, it was an interesting group to take in over the course of the week, even though, as I was mentioning to you earlier, and as you just mentioned, a very morbid element to a lot of these, just a lot of themes of death and dying and grief. Even in the big flashy musical, we have some of that. So, yeah, it'll be fun to break down whether some of those big swings landed with us and to discuss Halle Berry making history here and how shameful it is that she is still the only Black actress to win this category in 96 years. Still going.
Yikes.
Yeah, a landmark year, like I said. So excited to have you on to chat about it. Shall we jump right into it?
Let's jump in.
All right. Well, we're starting off with Miss Judi Dench, Dame Judi Dench, excuse me, Dame Judi Dench in Iris.
Get it right.
So, thank you. Yes. I don't know if she would correct me. I don't know if she cares about that sort of thing, but she probably would. Anyway, Dame Judi Dench here getting her fourth Oscar nomination in 5 years, which is really impressive. We last talked about her actually for her first Oscar nomination for Mrs. Brown, but since then she has become an Oscar winner. She wins Best Supporting Actress for Shakespeare in Love with only like 8 minutes of screen time. She's nominated again in supporting in 2000 for Chocolat, and now she's getting her second lead nomination here for Iris. So it's a huge peak period for Dame Judi, and doing so in her late 60s. So that's very rare and very exciting, I think. But Iris is a biopic of sorts about the writer Iris Murdoch, a British novelist who wrote a lot of books and specialized in philosophical themes, morality. She herself was eventually made a dame as well, and the film tells the story of her relationship with her husband John Bailey, played by Jim Broadbent, a professor and writer himself, focusing on the last few years of Iris's life as she was dealing with her dementia, which was worsening, and it greatly alarmed her as someone who valued her mind in her work. And so Judi is playing Iris. Jim Broadbent is her husband, like I said, and the film also shows them in flashbacks to their earlier years in their relationship, where they're played by Kate Winslet and Hugh Bonneville. We don't have to talk much about it because they don't actually overlap, of course, but all of this is based on John's memoir, Elegy for Iris, mostly centering on him taking care of her. So let's talk our first nominee here, starting off with a heavy one, I guess, Judi Dench. Thoughts on the great Judi Dench overall and her performance in Iris?
I was really surprised by this performance because of what I had come to know about Judi Dench. I know her for playing a queen and for being a real life queen and this longevity. She's sort of the British actress to me as far as prestige. I really have always had this respect for Judi Dench. We all have. I mean, I just think of her as a queen, the queen, different queen roles. So, with that being said, I don't always love her films. I think that Shakespeare in Love Oscar win is wild. Like, I don't understand. I don't compute. I think the Gwyneth Paltrow win is also wild, but that was episodes ago. But I love Judi Dench. Even going back to watching her in this BBC television production of Design for Living, which was fascinating. I thought that she really shined. And I know her theater work because a lot of it is filmed, which is great. So Macbeth, it's like, wow, like she's now doing a book collaboration about her Shakespearean work. So just a towering figure theatrically as well as filmically. So I went into this performance expecting something British and boring. I was very surprised that I really resonated with this film. Even in its darkness, there is light. I think it's a very erotic and sensual film. A lot of that is due to Kate Winslet's performance. But the younger and older versions of both characters, the husband and the wife, are so in sync that they seemed like they were actually younger versions of the older characters. And when the two performances are cut together, when it's, going between skinny dipping and then, the struggles with Alzheimer's, it's really harrowing. And the fear on Judi Dench's face, the confusion, I think we all, so many of us can recognize that look of not just confusion, but like panic with no words communicated. That scene where she was on television and lost her train of thought was just so heartbreaking. Those silent moments really resonated with me. Again, she got the nomination because of the big moments, one can say, right? But those quiet moments of internal panic were instantly recognizable. It was just so heartbreaking. And to me, my favorite nomination of hers.
Yeah, this is an interesting one to start with because people look back on this lineup, and I think Iris is definitely the film that people don't really remember and hasn't really lasted compared to the other four, maybe. Not necessarily because it's bad, but it just hasn't had that staying power, which I do think is a shame because I do think this is a very sweet movie. I don't know if it's a masterpiece necessarily, and there are other films that deal with these topics of dementia and Alzheimer's and, older relationships maybe better, but what I think the film really is just a acting showcase. I mean, Jim Broadbent wins his Oscar for supporting actor for this. I think he's very good. He's having a great year.
He was gonna win
He's
for
in,
something.
yes, he shows up in 3 of the 5 films we're talking about today. So, like, truly having quite a year. But I was actually surprised with Judi because I hadn't really remembered a lot of this before this rewatch. I was surprised how much I was moved by her performance here. And, I think it's showing how a person who values their mind so much really grapples with the loss of that and just the loss of control and having no way of really like reversing course on that. Obviously, it's very powerful, and a lot of it does have to do with the kind of actress that Judi Dench is. I talked a lot on the Mrs. Brown episode about how her ability to be this commanding force, but also the way she uses her voice and that kind of like lilting, quiet quality at times to great effect and show some of that vulnerability. And I think that's really what she's tapping into a lot here, is that very quiet, delicate side of her. And I think one of the also better elements of her performance is just seeing that contrast, with the Kate, but also in the very first scene where she's just at that dinner and she's speaking about, there's only one freedom of consequence, that of the mind, and she's like singing out to these people without any self-consciousness. She just has such a centered quality, and you feel like she does have like some hidden knowledge that she could sort of impart to you. So we get that image of Iris before she's slipping into her illness, which gives us such a beautiful contrast with, obviously what happens when some of that centered quality starts to slip away and there's nothing she can do about it.
Oh, yeah. And this performance works so much because of what Kate Winslet is doing in concert with Judi Dench. I just
Yep.
wonder what those conversations were, because the sadness of seeing this free, youthful, independent, bold Iris deteriorating into a childlike state is just so powerful. And her chemistry with Jim is just
Mm.
so off the charts. It's like they were married in real life. They just really communicated this sense of groundedness in both of them. This performance really works, I think, because of the performances around it, elevating
Yeah,
it, you know?
for sure. Yeah. And what I also think is interesting, though, is that, typically we would sort of praise an actress for being a great reactor to their scene partner, and she does a lot of that really well, too. But actually, within the context of what this story is, she is distant and she is slipping into herself. So it's harder and harder for her to actually connect with the outside world because her mind is slipping so much. And I think in that respect, she actually does a great job of actually not having that kind of like connection after a certain point, even with Jim Broadbent, if that makes sense.
Oh, it makes total sense. She's
Yeah.
so internal in this. She's
Mm-hmm.
so just the childlike fear in her eyes when she cannot remember anything. You want to protect her, which is not something I usually feel with Judi Dench. Usually with Judi Dench, it's like badbitch.net, right? Just you talked about that
Yeah, she can
grounded
take care of
quality.
herself.
Yeah. And the vulnerability without making the character a victim. That's a very
Mm.
tricky balance. This could have been a caricature. The script and the filmmaking, it can give Lifetime. It can give, early 2000s HBO, like winning all the Emmys type thing. It's
Yep.
not groundbreaking, revolutionary, cinematic. work. But she and the other performers just really come together in collaboration and just make this happen and elevate the text, you know? And again,
Hmm.
it's not The Father, speaking of 2020, which to me was really cinematically brilliant. I think if the film had been better, I would have had an even deeper response.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, but even still, just again as that acting showcase, they totally elevate what is essentially kind of TV movie type of filmmaking. And to go back to that speech or the interview, the televised interview, I think that is very, very painful and raw because it's clearly bothering her that she can't connect the dots in her mind to make like an eloquent point. You know, like the words are just like right out of grasp. Like she can sort of see it, but she can't actually connect it and give that coherent thought. And that really did kind of affect me. And just the other scene where she has tears in her eyes and she's saying like she fears she's sailing into darkness. It breaks your heart. And we see how her condition just starts to worsen very rapidly, where she can't even read words correctly. She can't name like basic household items. She's always repeating herself and is just in a haze, you know? And I think what really hits home for me is how she gradually becomes kind of upset and kind of irritable. It's something that I've certainly dealt with in my family with older relatives, grandparents, and it's just really, really tough to watch.
Absolutely. My great aunt in New Orleans, hi Aunt Dean. She struggles with, you know, Alzheimer's, dementia. And what strikes me about her in relation to this performance, those tearful moments, those angry moments, like what is happening to me without saying or being able to say what is happening to me. You can just see it. And the authenticity of what Dench is able to capture through that is just so awe-inspiring. And I was just really immersed in the marriage and how that dynamic changes.
Mm.
She's the leader, she's the force, he's following her, and now he's having to step back and lead. And it's like, what am I even leading? I'm in over my head. Those moments where they're screaming at each other, or he's screaming at her
Yeah.
because he's just not used to this woman. Like, who is this? The film shows both sides of this relationship dynamic, and yet it's just still so sweet. It gets dark, but it's just so cute. It's strange to use words like cute and sweet and erotic to describe a film about a descent into blankness. But it's
Sure.
really, really, you know, a testament to Judi, I think, who really holds it all together.
Yeah. And I think it's important to have those elements because otherwise it would be so unrelentingly bleak, like other films have been. And I'm not saying that this is necessarily a better film because of it, but something like Amour is just like so horrendously bleak from start to finish that, you know, you can definitely appreciate some of the sweeter and lighter moments, to your point, that is in this. But another scene I really love for her is when at one point she does escape her home and just wanders off. And when she's returned back, she's kind of like escorted by her friend, who she happened to be, you know, having an affair with in the past. And she just has this sort of like vacant smile on her face as she's just kind of being escorted back. And it's, you know, another thing that speaks to my point about just being like so detached and so derealized almost. And I think it probably is more difficult than it seems without it feeling too hammy or super played up to the camera, like what she's trying to accomplish there. Like everything else has just gone away from her. And I don't know, I think it just is a very smart performance in that respect. And it doesn't feel insulting, I guess, to what people who have experienced that have been through, which sometimes like mental illness stuff can be tricky for Hollywood and even, you know, a British production like this.
Especially at this time. I was
Yeah.
surprised at how much nuance there was considering that it was 2001. And I believe Judi Dench's husband passed away around the time this was either being made or released. So I was
Yeah.
thinking about that as well. Just what melancholia she brought from that experience. That was in the back of my mind, doing research for the film, watching the film. I was thinking about that and how a marriage is at the epicenter of it. And she's just holding on to her husband in the film for dear life. And it's like, what grief did she have to pull herself out of to do this? Even if her husband hadn't passed away, he was still ill, at some
Yeah.
point during the making and preparation process. So that brings added dimension to this.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for mentioning that, because I was going to note that like, I didn't even know that until after I watched the film, and just realizing that just made it all the more kind of like, ugh, I can't imagine what she had to tap into and, try to keep it professional and keep showing up for work while this is happening and dealing directly with this kind of material of losing a spouse. Yeah, it's really tough, and I do commend her for that. And the whole climax where she sort of freaks out at the funeral of her friend, and her sort of trying to take the steering wheel as John is driving, and is, she's ducking out of the car, and they go into the woods and kind of lie down for a little bit. A lot going on there, but just her gasping out in that moment, "I love you," when she's lying next to him. It's another one that took me aback, just in the quiet sort of power of that.
Oh, yeah. I think if you're not on the verge of tears throughout this entire movie, you don't have a heart. It's just those
Yep.
moments are just so real and raw and fearless. She was so fearless to go there with this performance. And even there's a subtlety and a groundedness even when she's big and stratospheric, like
Yeah.
at the funeral. That's a big dramatic moment. Could have been her Oscar clip. Maybe not. It would have been a good one if it wasn't. But the details, the small details, even when they're about to get in the water and she has her socks on, and he's like, "Take your
Yeah.
socks off," and she's just walking forward. When she panics in the water and then comes back up, those moments
Hmm.
are so striking as well. You can just see this human being beneath all of it, and those flashes of the past woman coming up in between those moments of blankness, fear, vulnerability. That gives nice levels to this performance too, because you can see that she once was Kate Winslet. You can see that shining through, and you can see her boldness from the beginning of the film, her first appearance coming through, even in those moments of vulnerability. There's just so much going on here beyond just the playing of the things that we expect.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think in that respect, this deserves a little more credit than it maybe is given nowadays, which is like, there's not a lot of people these days rewatching Iris, which is fair, because considering the subject of the film. But I do think this subject is treated with more sensitivity than you might expect looking back on it. And so does she. And I think this may be her most, at least of her nominations, just physical kind of performance, even though it's so much of it is mental, obviously. Just her ability to communicate so much without dialogue, I think, is quite powerful.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that typically someone looking for something to watch tonight isn't going to be like, "Oh, let me turn this on." And again, I was so biased because, when I think of a Judi Dench movie, I think, "Oh, uh-oh, sleeping pill." But I promise you, this is not.
Unless it's Notes on a Scandal, to be
Right.
clear.
To be clear. Um, but check this out. Anyone listening, give this movie a chance because I think you'll be
Hmm.
pleasantly surprised. It is not even as depressing as even this conversation sounds. It's really watchable. It
Right.
holds up. It's really great. Good job.
Yeah. And it's a cool 90 minutes. So
Yeah, I thought it would be
that's
really
important.
long. I was like,
Yeah.
"Uh-oh, this is going to be the long one." But it wasn't.
Yes. Okay, well, unless we have anything else, we can move on to our next nominee.
Sure.
All right. Well, this is a hard pivot to a very different kind of film. Nicole Kidman in Moulin Rouge. Oh boy. All right. This is, like I said, a big one of our premier leading actresses of our time, getting her first Oscar nomination here. And, even though she didn't have a super long Hollywood career up to this point. Some were feeling that this was a bit overdue for her. So to introduce her here, Nicole Kidman. She was born in Hawaii, but she eventually grew up in Sydney, Australia, and she developed a love of acting from an early age. She was in several young theater productions. She made her film debut in a film called Bush Christmas in 1983, and she went on to appear in several Australian films. Her Hollywood crossover came with Days of Thunder, which she starred in with Tom Cruise, who she would soon marry. She got her first Golden Globe nomination for Billy Bathgate. She worked with Tom Cruise again in Far and Away. Eventually, she has her great year of 1995, where she's in Batman Forever as Dr. Chase Meridian, never forget. But she's also in To Die For, which is her breakthrough role as a respected actress. And she wins a Golden Globe. Really great performance, but wasn't Oscar nominated for it. But she's working in commercial movies, smaller movies through the late 90s, Portrait of a Lady, Practical Magic, Eyes Wide Shut. She's once again working with Tom Cruise, another great role for her, but that ultimately leads to her divorce. And really from there, she's, let's just say it, after her divorce, she's off to the races, right? Because this very year, 2001, she is really showing her range and getting that Oscar nomination. She's in The Others. She's in another movie called Birthday Girl, and here she has Moulin Rouge. So, Moulin Rouge, a lot to discuss with this one. Baz Luhrmann film, inspired by operas and classic tragedies, but told with this very Baz Luhrmann unique, chaotic energy lens. This is a musical, comedy, tragedy, extravaganza set in the turn of the century of the 20th century in Paris. And it tells the story of Christian, played by Ewan McGregor, a writer and poet who is recalling his doomed romance with a courtesan, Satine, Nicole Kidman, at the famous Moulin Rouge Club. And through his recollections, we learn of his joining up with a group of artists and performers who want to put on a play at the Moulin Rouge. So Christian is enlisted with being the writer of the play and convincing Satine to star in it. And Harold Zidler, here's Jim Broadbent again, is the proprietor. And Christian hopes to convince him to put on the play. So anyway, things become very messy when Zidler has already tasked Satine with courting the Duke of Monmouth in exchange for him financing the club and helping turn it into a theater. There's some mistaken identity that happens, and Satine thinks the Duke is Christian, and he ends up falling in love with her, and she falls in love with him. But of course, their affair is tenuous because of their situation, and also because she is very sick. So, deep breath. Whew, a lot going on here. Very curious your thoughts on this one, because this is a very divisive movie, Moulin Rouge, but thoughts on Nicole Kidman, this movie, and her first big Oscar nomination here.
Ooh, where does one begin? I'm going to begin with my thoughts on Nicole Kidman because I have a lot of them. And anyone listening to this, please don't completely drag me. I know that her filmography is iconic. I know that she received the AFI Life Achievement Award this year, and you just look at the clips of all the films she's done, and it's like, wow, longevity, wow, versatility. I think that I'm very hot and cold with Nicole Kidman because I think of Nicole Kidman and I think of latter day Nicole Kidman, right? I think of being the Ricardo's Nicole Kidman, which was a damn mess. Like, I was watching that thinking, first the statue and now this. Why is everyone allowing everyone to disrespect Lucille Ball? Like, Aaron Sorkin, oh my God, we wanted Kate Blanchett in that. So I've been very hot and cold on Nicole Kidman, with the exception of what should have been her first nomination, which I texted you about, Eyes Wide Shut. That was completely fire. When I was little, I used to confuse Nicole Kidman with Naomi Watts. Very.
She used to be her nanny, so it makes sense. They were very close.
Absolutely. But Nicole Kidman in Moulin Rouge, she was okay, you know? She just doesn't make my blood boil in that way that I'm looking for, even though she totally commits and sells this tone. I love that she's having so much fun in this. That's what shines through for me. You can tell
Hmm.
that she's having so much fun and she's just saying yes to everything and making these big, bold choices. She has great chemistry with Ewan McGregor. She is giving a movie star performance, really killing it, not vocally, but really, really killing it acting wise, just selling the ending. It really breaks your heart when she dies. You miss her. And when she's not on screen, it's like, where is she? Because it's such a star
Hmm.
performance. And again, those moments when she's on the swing and she's on stage and she's shimmying, you just love to watch her in a film where I needed something to grasp a hold of because it was very much like, like that was how I
Yeah.
experienced it. Like, this editing is wild. This color palette is
Yeah.
wild. I'm not the biggest Baz Luhrmann person either. Sorry, Australia. But,
Jeez.
um,
Coming
I,
for Australia.
I know, right? I love Margot Robbie, so don't worry. But
Okay.
I was very taken aback by just trying to digest the film to the point where
Yeah.
I almost didn't even know what my opinion on it was. But I think that she was the thing about the film that I could grasp hold of. I followed her. I thought she gave a very decent performance in this.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, for me, Nicole Kidman is one of the greats, personally. I love her intensity as an actress. I love when she really invests in a role. Obviously, she has like an incredible face for the movies, and she does a lot with it. She doesn't just rely on her looks to sort of skate by on what being a movie star is, and that's it. She really, I think, cares about the work. And I do love how intentional she is with working with directors and that she admires and like going out on a limb. And I think you're really seeing that here. I mean, Baz Luhrmann is definitely a cilantro director where either you love him or you just find this to be disgusting almost. Like, that's just too much. I get it either way because I used to feel that way when I was watching some of his films from this era when I was growing up. Now I feel like I've sort of come to respect how weird and true he is to himself and his taste. He knows he's not going to be for everyone, and that's fine. But yeah, this movie is so wild. Again, I understand why people don't like it. It's very over the top. It seems like very style over substance. But I think I have just come to really embrace all of it for what it is, the decadence, everything, using these classic sort of operatic stories and tragedies and like putting this like almost MTV kind of spin on it. And yes, the dialogue is heightened and the editing is insane, but he is just telling a big, bold story here about love and very earnestly is like leading into these very pure, basic emotion. And I think you need a committed actress like Nicole Kidman to just help to pull that off. I think it would also be very easy for other actresses who could have been cast in this to just be like two-dimensional, tragic female lead who's beautiful and tragic, and like that's where it ends. But I do think she does find a way of like, just throwing herself into Baz's vision and doesn't embarrass herself. Seems very at home in that like goofball comedy screwball stuff, but is also delivering as that sort of operatic heroine who feels trapped in her circumstances, but she's just doing the best she can. And just, I think she does take what opportunities she can take within this film to try and make her human.
Absolutely. I was really struck by just the tightrope walk of the comedy and the tragedy. That's really,
Yeah.
really difficult to do. And she does both. Again, I just really, really was struck by how much of a blast she seemed to be having. I'm wanting more of that from her. Like, please do something else like this where you're just having fun. It didn't even seem like an Oscar performance necessarily.
No.
Because when I think of an Oscar performance from Nicole Kidman, fun isn't the first thing that pops up. And
Fair.
regardless, I really had fun watching this movie. I think with Baz Luhrmann, like you're saying, it's an acquired taste that you sort of come to appreciate the originality, the charm. There's nobody else like him. The pop songs in this are great. There's just a lot going on here. Like, oh, is that
Yeah.
Kylie Minogue? Like, what's going on?
Yeah.
Um, and she grounds it. She just makes you. She could have been so easily lost in all of this excess,
Yeah.
and it's a testament to her performance that even with Ewan McGregor scream singing in her face, she stands out. Like she's able to leave an impression and make you only look at her, which you understand
Yeah.
the character's star quality, why everyone is so drawn to her, and she sells the illness. She just sells it all. And that moment when he's in her boudoir and he's
Mm.
there to read poetry and she's being seductive and screwball and all this double entendre and all this stuff going on, it's just a romp. Even with the tragic ending, it's a romp. And I really think she deserves her 10s for that.
Yes, for sure. I mean, first of all, just the performance that kind of establishes her with the diamonds are a girl's best friend for me has always been very memorable because she just fits the part of that total, like, you could tell that she is like the star attraction of the Moulin Rouge, and you can see why very quickly from her performance. She's gorgeous. She has that breathy sort of Marilyn Monroe type singing voice in that performance. Just her facial expressions are so bold and broad, and after that, just like the whole comic misunderstanding stuff of Zidler pointing to the guy that he wants her to woo, the Duke, but she thinks it's Christian, and all her sort of over the top advances on him are very manic and sort of campy, and him talking about poetry and her just being like, a poetry reading, oh, I love a little poet. it's just the vocal performance, I think, is just so fun from her on top of everything. But yes, that stuff in the bedroom where she thinks that she's there for sex and he's just there to pitch to her. Yeah, all those double entendres are so fun. Like, oh, well, he's like, well, I prefer to do it standing and all this stuff. And her sort of facial reactions are so goofy, but she really commits to it. And then when he's like starting, to your point, reciting and then eventually scream singing your song to her, and she's just like writhing around on the bed like she's like Meg Ryan and When Harry Met Sally doing the orgasm. It's just because that's what she thinks, that's what he wants. He's just some guy who wants to recite poetry, and that's how he kind of like gets off.
Mhm.
It's very really really funny. Just it's again very broad, but she nails the tone beautifully.
Absolutely. And she conveys that this is a wounded woman, that this is a hardened
Yeah.
woman. And yet it doesn't distance her capacity for love. And when she does fall in love, you can see it. You can still see like
Yeah.
joy, even when she's saying, I'm not in love with you in as many ways as she can, or I'm a courtesan. Like, it's my job to make men something. I don't remember the exact quote, but you just see the hardness and then the softness underneath that. You see, like, the idealistic girl that she might have been once upon a time and how she turned into this hardened woman who still has a good time. That's really hard to do as well. There's just so much going on here. And I think the style of the film sometimes undercuts what she's really doing because it's really great what she's doing. And, not necessarily my favorite of this lineup, but I see why it's so iconic. This is iconic, like really big,
Iconique. Yes.
iconic, very legendary performance. And I see why, even though I have things I could say about, the accent work, what country are you from, Nicole Kidman, and all these different movies. Even though
Sure.
there's things we could all say about Nicole Kidman, you can't deny the risk taking. You can't be a hater. You have to give her your 10s when she really delivers, and she delivers here.
And also, I do think she to that point is capturing the exhaustion of like living with this illness she has. You know, she's dying of consumption, you know, without necessarily overacting that part of it. Sort of like what a little bit what we were saying with Judi Dench. Like you could sort of see the mental turmoil of just her situation of knowing something is wrong and not being able to really control it, and just those like gasping breaths or like the blood, you know, running out of her face when she's faced with like this, all these factors of her illness, and then also this forbidden relationship she's in now. Like it's, she's juggling so much, you know, that is again harder than it looks, because she does make it look surprisingly easy when I know it was not.
Absolutely. It's a very physical performance. She's
Yeah.
very upright and, it's just so balletic, almost like she's
Mm.
in a ballet. It's a very dance-oriented performance when she's not dancing. It's very ice cold under the volcano, as Hitchcock would say. You just have to applaud it. You have to applaud that she just went for it and she understood what movie she was in. She understood the tone. There's a synthesis going on between her and Baz that is just like, wow, this leaps off the screen. You guys are great collaborators with one another.
Yeah. And I do give her a lot of credit for that, because like what kind of reference does she even have for something like this, for anything that's been done in the past? Like sure, Romeo and Juliet sort of is in this style, but this is like on steroids from what he was trying to accomplish with that. So yeah, kudos to her for just not embarrassing herself
Oh my
and being able to
goodness.
pull this off. Yeah.
On
Right? Because this could
steroids
have
and
been like,
crack.
yes, very much so. I mean, honestly, just like the whole can scene where they're pitching to the Duke and they're just like bouncing around the room and doing all this chaotic stuff. I love that scene. I know it's like extremely dumb, but I have a big smile on my face every time. Just saying.
Absolutely. Absolutely. As you should. This movie will make anyone smile, even if you're a
Maybe
little
not everyone, but yeah.
lost.
Yeah.
I mean, even the
Yeah.
people who don't like it, come
Sure.
on. Come on. Like,
Yeah.
it is not boring. It's very, very entertaining. You will be glued from beginning to end. Even if you're not a Baz Luhrmann person, which I am not, trust me, this was not designed for me. And it really was an entertaining, farcical romp done in the style of a lot, not only the operas too, but of, the French plays, the French
Yeah.
farces. There's so much postmodernism going on here and remixing and mixing and mixing the concept of art, which I think this is a synthesis of a lot of Baz Luhrmann's mission statement of his work. This is the film I think of when I think of his style.
Oh yeah, for sure. The whole Tango de Roxanne sequence I think is incredible. Just the intercutting there and her having to like endure the Duke and all his rage as he's trying to really, you know, take advantage of her and comes close to raping her, and just her fear there I think is really well portrayed. And I think one of her best scenes is right after that when she escapes his room and runs back to Christian and is just like desperate and crying and saying she doesn't want to pretend, she didn't want to lie anymore, and just panicking, you know, and that the Duke knows the truth about her and Christian. And again, it's like she's juggling all those different things of her illness plus this situation, having to keep that up. Like she can't find any time in her day to just like settle down and relax. I don't know. It's just kind of remarkable to me that that is the through line of her character, and it is such a joyful performance to watch at the same time.
Absolutely. Just reading the synopsis on paper, it's like bummer, but she
Yeah.
just lifts it to the heavens. And it's a great musical performance. Like as an not an
Yeah.
American movie musical. I'm not sure like the distribution history or what money was coming from what nation, but just as a movie musical,
Yeah.
wow, what a statement. How unique. There's no other film quite like this. And she just is, like you're saying, juggling so much for such a tragic character. It could have been one note. I don't know what this looks like if another actress plays it. Do you know who else was considered for this?
No. Probably Naomi Watts.
Probably, or
I'm just
even a
kidding.
Gwyneth Paltrow. It would have been very
Yeah,
different.
I could
Very
see that.
different.
Very different. But yeah, I weirdly, like, I can see other versions of this, but I feel like this version with Nicole is just so definitive that I can't even imagine anyone else topping what she was able to do at this point in time. So yeah, it's really, really powerful work. And I think the ending, to bring it back to that, her sort of like powering through the staging of the play at the end is also played, I think, with a realism that is quite affecting, and her just like building up the courage to finally make that declaration of love to Christian in front of the whole audience, you know, and just through this Come What May song, obviously, but just, it's just moments like that where it's like, of course this woman is going to go on to be like this enduring star. Like, she just evokes so many emotions at once for me, and she's, again, so watchable that it is actually, like you said, a very great like movie star performance in that respect. Even though she is having to do a lot of things that are a little bit out of her element, it is also just kind of synthesizing a lot of what she is just naturally good at.
Absolutely. All of her range is on display. All of it. You can almost see this being an example of everything that she was capable of doing at that time. How often does a role like this come along? And it came along at the perfect time for her. You know, she had been
Yeah.
really a tabloid figure. Even with the critical
Mm-hmm.
acclaim that she received, this is the first nomination. It's coming in the aftermath of that messy divorce. And she's overcoming that through sheer force of will and work ethic, and she's working in this. And when they zoom in on her face and she's sick and you see the sweat juxtaposed with this glamazon on stage and the corset and everything, she just works the hell out of it. And it's fantastic. And she wins you over. And from beginning to end, the journey you go on, you're just with her all the way. If she's not in this movie, it completely falls apart for me,
Very
probably.
much so. Yeah, I agree. I couldn't really find, I was just looking to see if there was alternate casting while you were talking, and the only thing I found was Kate Hudson said she wanted really badly to be in it. So I don't know how that would have worked out, but
Interesting. That's all I'll
yeah.
say.
I don't know your thoughts on Kate Hudson, if you have a take on that.
I love Kate Hudson.
But yeah,
I cannot see it. I also think at this time she was way too young.
yeah. I mean, this is right after Almost Famous when she's like, yeah, like 20 years old. So I think that would be, maybe she's not quite there at
Not
that point
quite
in her
there,
career.
maybe 10 years later, but
Yeah.
again, just this was so influential. I don't think there would have been a nine that Kate Hudson and Nicole Kidman, right, were in. I don't think there would
Right.
be that without this. This is so influential on 21st century musicals. This brought on a musical
Yeah, it is.
revival of sorts. I don't know if
Mm-hmm.
Chicago, speaking of Rob Marshall, wins if it had not been for this movie crawling so that Chicago could run. It's really
Very good point.
exciting. It's a hugely influential film, and bringing the MTV elements to a musical, it's genius. I sound like I love this movie, but again, I'm very
Yeah, I'm like, are you turning around on this movie now?
maybe I am. Maybe I am, you know?
Wow. Wow. Yeah, I totally forgot this other thing too, which I'm sure other people are screaming by now, but Courtney Love actually auditioned for this to play Satine. Didn't work out.
Of course
But,
not.
you know, would have been a wild, different take,
I love
because
Courtney
I'm
Love.
also reading, like, we have Heath Ledger and Jake Gyllenhaal wanted to be Christian. Ethan Hawke read for it. Leonardo DiCaprio, obviously. But we got what we got, and I'm happy with the final product.
Oh yeah, I really can't imagine anyone else doing it.
Yeah,
These other choices just seem so strange, even though if Courtney Love had done it, I would have really wanted to see it. Just like, what is this about to be? That would have been
totally. Yeah,
interesting.
yeah, yeah. So, what could have been? All right. So, unless you have anything else, we can move on to our next nominee.
We can move on.
All right. Sissy Spacek in the Bedroom. So this is a very exciting one here. Sissy Spacek getting her 6th Oscar nomination, and it's her first in 15 years. So we last talked about her with Crimes of the Heart back in 1986. You know, it's kind of similar to Ellen Burstyn the previous year, getting her first nomination for Requiem for a Dream after 20 years. So I love when we sort of get those legends finally returning to the Oscars after a long time away. But in between these two nominations, Sissy is kind of dabbling in a few different things. She's starting to do quite a bit of TV work, which tends to happen with actresses as they get older, as we know. TV, movies. She gets her first Emmy nomination. In film, though, she's not doing as much heavy duty work as she did in the 70s and 80s, taking on quite a few supporting roles in things like JFK and Affliction, Blast from the Past, The Straight Story. And now within the Bedroom, she's sort of reminding people here that she is one of the best actresses of her generation, I would say, getting some of the best reviews of her career. So In the Bedroom is part of my favorite subgenre, which, as everyone knows, is devastating family drama based on a short story called Killings by Andre Debout. And I'm very excited that this is the first Todd Field film that I'll be covering on the show. We'll be talking about his other 2 films down the line, Little Children and, of course, Tar. But In the Bedroom is about a well-to-do family, the Fowlers, living in Camden, Maine. We have Matt and Ruth Fowler, played by Tom Wilkinson and Sissy Spacek, and their college-age son, Frank, played by Nick Stahl. Frank has an older girlfriend, Natalie, Marissa Tomei, who has kids, and a violent ex-husband who tends to interrupt their lives. So Ruth is starting to get a little antsy about her son's relationship because she wants him to sort of continue to move forward in his career and not get stuck in this domestic situation. But Frank really loves Natalie. He loves her kids. And then one day, tragedy strikes when Frank is shot and killed by Natalie's ex-husband, which devastates Ruth and Matt, and they try to move forward in the wake of that tragedy. So we're back to a heavy one here, one that really actually feels like it was adapted from a play, I would say, just in watching it. You can really feel that. But I'm curious how In the Bedroom has resonated with you and your thoughts on Sissy Spacek overall in this performance.
I love, love Sissy Spacek as this gay boy being bullied at a boys' Catholic high school that I went to. Carrie got me through and allowed me to think of many a revenge fantasy. I just think that
Wow.
so many of us relate to so much of her work. That coal miner's daughter Oscar win is just chef's kiss. Like one of the best of that decade for sure. She ate. She did not come to play games. She never came to play games. And it sneaks up on you, right? Because when we think of Sissy Spacek, we think, oh, darn tootin', like the sweet woman with Southern accents. You know, I think of her as an actress of the South. Sometimes that accent kind of peeks through here by accident sometimes.
Can't help it.
You can't help it. But what a comeback, right? What depth, what subtlety. And it is a supporting performance. You know, it is a supporting performance to me. That was definitely what I took away from this. This was my second time watching In the Bedroom, and it really hit harder the second time. It's a movie that really requires you to go back and rewatch and look at the callbacks and the metaphors and all of the subtext. It's a hard film to watch. It's very brutal. And I'm not just talking about the literal violence, I'm talking about the emotional violence. That argument between her and her husband, where they say these things to each other, it's very ordinary people. That's what I would compare this to. I think that
very much so.
She and Mary Tyler Moore are doing similar things, and that they're asked to dissect these quote unquote cold women who are, you know, going through these things and losing their children, and how do they grapple with that in suburbia. It's very much that, but this is so like, speaking of being on steroids, this is ordinary people on steroids. I think they're able to go even farther with things that they couldn't really tackle in the 80s. I love Todd Field as well. I love the women of Todd Field. There's so many open spaces in this film that gradually just become more and more claustrophobic, you know. In the beginning, it's so beautiful, and we're in Maine, and there are lobster, and all these things. They're just so picturesque. And then we peel back the layers underneath, and it's really, really startling. And a lot of that is because of what Sissy Spacek does not say. And she simmers and she simmers and she simmers, and then we explode in that argument, which I know got her this nomination.
100%. Like, it's very clear as you're watching the film that, like, Oscar voters are like, okay, we're taking notes here. Yeah, so like I said, this is a genre that really resonates with me, and this film is one of those top tier examples, I think, of how a good family drama can be done right. And I'm very glad that you mentioned Ordinary People, because I also wanted to bring up a comparison here. As many people know, I love that film. And this is such a fascinating complement to it, you know, dealing with the death of a child and these, you know, parents struggling to move on, but sort of reacting in very different ways. The end result is very different, as we know, but I think, you know, what they share is just this kind of emotional honesty that we don't often see. I think that I think really rings true to life and is very well observed about human nature and grief. And so, you know, there's that overlap, but also, as you also mentioned, you know, the fact that we have Sissy Spacek, who won her Oscar in 1980 over Mary Tyler Moore, playing a grieving mother, you know, and having a somewhat similar character, you know, not entirely, but there's some overlap. And Sissy loses this year for playing a very similar character. I just think that's kind of fun cycle, I guess. But this performance from her, I think, if this ends up being her final Oscar nomination, which is entirely possible because she doesn't make a lot of films these days and it's been 23 years now, but if it is, then like, what a way to go out. I think she really digs into this character and gets so many opportunities to show her range, and I think really create a history for Ruth that feels natural. You know, even before the tragedy happens, in that opening section, she just has this very easy confidence, at least on the surface, of someone who doesn't seem to have apparent problems, but she is not totally in the clouds necessarily. Like, she's sharp, she's very observant. And when she has that conversation with her son at the baseball game, like, she really is looking at him, like she's like sussing out whether he's for real with his feelings for Natalie. And it feels like she's just like looking right through him, kind of like a mother does, of just like wanting to protect her son and to make sure that he's capable of dealing with all the messiness of this situation with the kids and the ex-husband and all that. It's subtle work, but I think it's so specific and really obviously lays the groundwork for that incredible explosive scene. But I don't know, it's just so specific to me watching her. I feel like I really know her so intimately just from watching her even before the tragedy. As someone who is in New England, I very much know women like Ruth, people that sort of like seem to have a good head on their shoulders, but they've also been through some stuff. And then when something bad happens, it just kind of unravels their whole world.
Yeah, this is devastating. And she
Yeah.
just sensed, you can feel her sensing this isn't going to end well. This isn't going to end well at the beginning of the movie. Like,
Yeah.
just trying to warn everyone this isn't going to end well, and no one listening to her. And when I think of this movie, the scene that I think of doesn't even show her face. And you know what I'm talking about. When
Yeah.
she is at the school and Marissa Tomei comes to apologize, and we don't see her
Mm-hmm.
face, we see the back of her head, and she just slaps the shit out of Marissa Tomei. And like, we never see her face, but you can just feel this seething rage. And she keeps saying
Yeah.
throughout the movie, I'm so angry, I'm so angry, I'm so angry, even when she's smiling. I think that with grief, one of the stages that I don't see explored a lot, but this really does a great job of exploring is rage, anger. When that joke is made at the table, we're not all gonna die off. And her face, her reaction to that, the
Yeah.
smile underneath it, you can still just sense the teeth in that. And anger isn't even something that I think of when I think of Sissy Spacek. So this is really different for her. This warmth is supplanted by this coldness. It's just
Yeah.
so, but you get it. You really, really get it. It's so relatable. How is she supposed to handle it? And she asks her husband, "Why are you acting like nothing has happened?"
Mm.
Just so angry and running into her son's killer. And then the vengeance. This film is really a tone poem about vengeance. Todd Field picks these human discomforts and makes these films that are really these meditations on it. For instance, Tar, or as I like to call it, Duh, as a joke between my boyfriend and myself. Hi, Sam. Like, that's this meditation on ego and cancel culture and all these uncomfortable things, but he brings so much nuance. And here it's the same, but with an exploration of grief and the way that she approaches that by just zeroing in on this obsessive anger. She's just sitting, smoking her cigs, watching TV, something she has in common with Renée Zellweger here in very different contexts.
Wow.
It's shattering. It's
It
shattering
is.
and startlingly
Mm-hmm.
vulnerable.
Yeah, it's really really something. Unfortunately, we don't actually get Ruth's initial reaction to when she finds out, which is an interesting sort of directorial choice, but you do see on her face at the funeral like this unimaginable grief, especially because we know, because we've seen it, she has had her suspicions that this was not going to end well, and then those suspicions were confirmed. And I think that is kind of like what doubles the grief for her, is that she knew it was coming in a way, and her worst fears were realized. I think that's what makes it an even more specific sort of examination of grief, is that it's not like her son drowned or anything, or it wasn't an accident. It just kind of happened as she suspected and feared that it might. And I think she really, really captures that feeling of just like, she did sort of bury some of those feelings, but she has expressed them. So at least she can't say that like, oh, I never said anything. But she did try to, guide it and guide him to make that decision to end it with this woman. I don't know. I think just the total thorniness and the complexity of that is so fascinating to watch her go through. Just, and you see all of it in her face too. It's not like it's a particularly like wordy performance until obviously the explosive moment that I'm sure we'll get to. But I don't know. Like I said, I think she really lays the groundwork so beautifully and fills in the gaps.
Absolutely. Because there isn't a lot here on the page, and it could have been very
Right.
two dimensional. All of these characters, I think what they all have in common in these nominated roles, they're elevating the material that they're given because these are some
Yeah.
of the greatest actresses of all time. Sissy Spacek is not given a full meal here. Again, to me, it's very much a supporting role. It's her husband's story to me, but the way that she just makes you long for her presence lingers throughout, even when she's not on screen. And so much of this is inaudible. She's not speaking. And in a way, it's also a very physical performance. That New England tightness is so translated here. And she does a lot for the viewer in making you feel immersed in this world. And it's just complementing Todd Field's vision. It's just so wonderful.
It really is. Yeah. And just to watch her growing frustration as she is not getting justice after this is really very compelling to watch, because it's still just like it's simmering and simmering and simmering, and it boils over in these moments of being like, he killed our son, it was no accident, you know. And her line reading when the lawyer is like, I understand, and she just very quietly says to herself, no you don't. I think it is very painful, because it's true. No one can truly understand, having to experience the death of a child, and unless you've been through it yourself, And just to speak to what I was kind of talking about before, when she's talking to the priest about her grief, and she describes it as like a rest in music where there's no sound, but it's so loud. I think, she makes that line feel very natural when it could have been writerly, I think. And she says she's just angry, and there's this very brilliant small moment that you might not notice on a first glance, but it's so well observed to the grief process and to her individual experience, where he's talking to her about this other woman who found a lot of comfort in bonding with other mothers who lost a child, and you see her listening, and there's like this, there's still that grief there, but there's a little bit of hope that she's considering it, and she asks what happened to this woman's kid, and he says she drowned, and she just says, oh, almost in like this disappointed way, because again, I think in her mind, Frank's death wasn't an accident. It's not something that was beyond her control even. She had those bad feelings leading up to it, and maybe part of her blames her husband, and especially maybe herself, for not pushing hard enough or in the right way, and just saying like, oh, like that her grief is different than that woman's grief, and it's unresolved because this man who is responsible was set free on bail, and she still sees him as she's just walking about her everyday life.
Yeah, you feel the rage, you feel the fear, you feel the pandemonium and confusion when she runs
Mm-hmm.
into her son's killer in the general store. And she says in that argument scene, which again is the scene, he smiles.
Yeah.
He's smiling. I don't know what
Mm-hmm.
to do. She says, I don't know what to do. It's just so overwhelming. How does a human being manage to place that anywhere? This could have been a histrionic performance. And of course, like there wouldn't have necessarily been anything wrong with that. But the humanity that she brings to this, as if we know this woman with so little dialogue, it's really compelling.
It really is. Yeah, I think we should get into that argument scene, because it is like the centerpiece, not only of her performance, but of the film itself, I think, where they finally agree to talk it out. And I love the little slight, like, sarcastic, bitter moments that she has sprinkled throughout it. Like in the beginning when he is asking to talk, and she's like, talk? Who, us? With that, like, very bitter tone, as if, like, oh, that wouldn't be anything like us. Like, what will the neighbors think? That sort of thing. And yeah, saying, I want you to stop acting like nothing happened. And just the tone and the specificity of her calling out his parenting of their son, or being too lenient, and her kind of like smashing the plate to the ground, which is so violent. Very great plate smashing scene. And saying like, Frank died for your fantasy piece of ass,
Oh,
suggesting that he wanted Frank to still be with this woman because he liked having her around to look at, basically.
oh my goodness. I don't know what was more brutal, the shooting scene or this argument. The
I know.
things that they're saying that they can't take back, that can't be unsaid,
Mm.
are just so cutting and yet cathartic. And all of my catharsis in watching this came from what Sissy Spacek was doing. When she smashes that
Totally.
plate, it's like, finally, it's a relief to you because it's like
Mm-hmm.
so contained until that moment, so much decorum. And then she just lets her rip, and you're like, finally, we've been waiting for this. So there's a deep sense of satisfaction. And when he blames her and she has these flashes of, what did I do? Maybe you're right. Maybe it was me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's just like, oh my God. I'm struggling
Yeah.
to even talk about this because it was so affecting. It really made you come as close as you can to understanding the level of what she's feeling. I can't even imagine having to bury a child, but everything in that scene making you feel a sense of relief. You don't know whose side you're on, and yet I was swayed to her side because she blames him, he blames her, and then she takes responsibility, and then it's all vulnerability. The anger falls away, and you realize all of the stages of grief are in this performance. What a hat trick, right?
I know.
Just the fact that
Yeah.
she had gone years without a nomination. It saddens me because you just see every level of what she can do here in this one scene, in this one scene. And
Yeah.
it just breaks your heart and then puts it back together. And they're still there for each other. They're still there for each other because all they have
Right.
is each other. And she also, this is said earlier when it's like he was starting his practice. I wanted more children. You can see that anger in this scene too. Like, we
Mm.
could have had more. This was my only one. But because you put medicine first, because you were attracted to this other woman, just grasping at straws, trying to make sense of something that doesn't make sense, that will never make sense, and trying to go on. You see her reaching for that and being so angry because it's like, I can't, I'm frozen. What normalcy can I find in this? You know, and you can just sense
Mm.
her blaming of God. You can sense her blaming, and justifiably so, because what else is she supposed to do?
How do you move forward with your life? Yeah, I know. Just when he does tell her that she's so unforgiving and bitter, just the look on her face is so shattering just of hearing those words. And I also love when just like the tension breaks when there's like a Girl Scout at their door. It's like they've had this cool down moment and they've had a bit of time to process it, and they do apologize and they hug it out, and they finally sort of come to terms with all those repressed feelings. Like, it was necessary to say these things to each other, as harsh as they are, because now they can finally move forward and not be stuck in this just endless sort of limbo. And when she does cry on his shoulder, feeling so helpless and not knowing how to like go forward, knowing that their son's killer is just like, you could see him at the general store, and feeling so helpless. It's very emotional to watch, but she gets it so right, just the exhaustion of it.
Oh my
So,
goodness. This is A1 for me. Like, she
mm-hmm.
did not come to play games, never does.
No.
She just really, and in the end, after he's committed this murder, which I was like, ooh, like,
Mm-hmm.
oh my goodness, in the
Yeah.
woods. And then he comes home and she's in bed, like, did you do it? Just so
Mm.
almost like the journey from point A to B, how almost she comes back with this Lady Macbeth-esque, like, it's just so powerful. And then she's cooking and you hear her calling out for him in the darkness, like early morning, and like it doesn't even end on her face, and still it just lingers on her presence. I love that this film
Right.
allows for us to sit in that limbo. And I think a lesser film would not have had that argument end the way that it did. That's love.
Yeah.
That's reality. It's not always,
Mm-hmm.
this simple thing. I think that's
Right.
really powerful, the open-endedness of so much of this.
That's the Todd Field touch, I think. And just to maybe speak to your point a little earlier about this maybe being a supporting performance, I do think the fact that she more or less disappears for the last 20 to 30 minutes outside of that brief moment at the end may have affected her chances of winning, perhaps, and of people feeling like this is a super well-rounded lead actress nomination necessarily. I understand what you're saying. I do still think she is sort of lead, but it is borderline. I think it can sort of go either way ultimately, but for me, she does linger enough, even when she's not on screen, that it's sort of like it would feel wrong for me to put her at supporting. I don't know, but
Absolutely. And
that's
she's
just
such
me.
a star. She's such a legend. She's such an
Yeah,
icon.
she's a
And
leading lady star. Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, so highly, highly recommend In the Bedroom to anyone who hasn't seen it yet. Even if we've spoiled the whole thing and you already know what's going to happen, I think just the level of emotion involved is something to really behold, and just the depths that she and especially Tom Wilkinson really go to. R.I.P. Well, let's get to our final losing nominee here. Let's do a little happier tone here again with Renée Zellweger for Bridget Jones's Diary. So, another fun one here. Renée Zellweger getting her first Oscar nomination this year. But sort of like Nicole, she's been kind of like putting in the work up to this point of getting this breakthrough nomination. So she was born in Texas, and she didn't necessarily have a big theater training like a lot of other actresses we've talked about. She took an interest in acting during college, but she didn't major in it or anything. She broke into commercials actually and bit parts in films in the early 90s, including in some major films like Dazed and Confused. She had a role in Reality Bites. Her first somewhat substantial role was The Return of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. You know, she did Love in a 45, Empire Records, gaining a little bit of attention, but then Jerry Maguire in 1996 was the moment for her of announcing herself as I am an actress to watch, basically. She's opposite Tom Cruise, obviously, and while she doesn't get an Oscar nomination, she gets very good reviews and gets her first SAG nomination. So a few years later, she's working with Meryl Streep in One True Thing, where she's also really good. 2000 is a good year for her, where she's in Me, Myself, and Irene, as well as Nurse Betty, and she wins the Golden Globe for that, but isn't nominated at the Oscars. Finally is getting that nomination for this film, and I think maybe a large part of it is because she proved some people wrong, because Bridget Jones's Diary is based on a novel about a working class British woman who writes a diary about her love life and her feelings about men, her weight, being a modern woman, things of that nature. And of course, Renée is not British. She doesn't smoke, which is a big part of the character. She's not overweight, which is sort of another key element of the story. But she went about proving why she was right for the role. She did a lot of accent prep. She gained 20 pounds. She smoked herbal cigarettes. She did the full like Daniel Day-Lewis transformation for this, and as many people felt, she kind of pulled it off and gets that nomination for a pretty light romantic comedy, which we don't often see happening. But Bridget Jones's Diary, like I said, it's about Bridget Jones, played by Renée, a 32-year-old single woman working in Britain at a publishing company. She writes a diary of her life, and she's very cheeky and full of all these well-observed quips. And she enters a relationship with her boss, Daniel, Hugh Grant, and she falls in love with him, but he may not love her back, and she realizes he may not be the one. Meanwhile, we have Mark Darcy, Colin Firth, who she has a bad first interaction with, and they keep showing up in each other's lives. He's engaged to someone else, but they start to develop some unexpected feelings for each other, and we've got a bit of a love triangle. So, yes, I think this will be a nice break from the heavy trauma, perhaps. Intrigued to hear your thoughts on Renée overall and her transformative performance here.
Oh my goodness. Renée Zellweger, where do I begin with that? I first remember Renée in Chicago and being like, wow, this is a comedian. This is someone capable of dramatic depth. She brings depth to everything she's in. Her Oscar wins are interesting. And to me, don't really reflect what she can really do. To me, this is the Renée Zellweger performance. And again, she's not British at all. You know, sometimes that Texas accent, I kind of peeped it slipping out in a couple moments, but it didn't matter.
Sure.
This is the ideal romantic comedy performance. I first watched it in a Jane Austen adaptation class at Northern
Oh.
Kentucky University. And the way that it's adapted is just so amazing. It's based on this huge bestseller. Obviously, the casting of the role was big in the UK, and she got this role against all odds. And it was a controversial choice. She didn't walk in and everyone's like, yay, she's here. It was like, what are you about to do with our character? And she nails it. She's so believable. She's so relatable. And the pathos of her comedy, the mark of a great comic is the pathos and the melancholy underneath the making us laugh. That really works in a great, narrative format, especially. And those moments where she's alone and you can just see that she feels like, oh, I'm going to be alone forever, and dealing with sexual harassment. And you can just sense the anxiety underneath it because this film is very much a time capsule. It's very of its time, and there are things that don't hold up for everyone. And yet, that's neither here nor there when talking about this performance. She's so relatable, and you're watching it, and she's panicking about being 32. And it's like, you're so young. How sad that is that you're panicking about these gender expectations. And then it's like, you're not big. Like, why are you trying to lose weight?
No.
She brings this level of anxiety and sadness to this, especially in her moments alone. Her chemistry with her very hot leading men, both of them, it just sings. And
Yeah.
it's amazing. And when she's running through the snow at the end, there's so many iconic moments that she lives up to, from running in the snow and kissing Colin Firth to the soundtrack to the bunny outfit, just iconic moment after iconic moment. And she grounds it all with so much humanity. And I loved it.
Beautiful. Yes, absolutely. Well, I can't say that I love, love, love Renee Zellweger necessarily as an actress. I do really enjoy her more often than not. So I guess I would say I'm a solid fan. Not like over the moon, she's top tier necessarily, but she just has such a unique presence and a unique face for a movie star. And I think she went through a lot during this time with people being very nasty about her appearance and her weight. And people still have things to say about her face nowadays, which is just a bummer to me because she is very talented. And, what I like about her is that she is another one who kind of puts in the work and challenges herself whenever she can, and her two wins, to your point, are definitely not universally loved. I sort of weirdly enjoy the hamminess in Cold Mountain because that's kind of a snoozy movie otherwise. Um, I remember sort of liking her in Judi, but not to the extent of her like sweeping that season like she did. But we will get to that eventually. But Bridget Jones's Diary is so fun, and I might shock you and others here. This is my first time actually seeing it
What?
from start to finish. Yes. I mean, I've seen like TV, like seeing it on TV and stuff, but just like sitting down, just like watching it as a film. This was my first time. I don't know how I had seen Iris before I had seen Bridget Jones's
Right.
Diary, but here we are. Here we are. We all have our blind spots. I don't know what to tell you. But this is really good work, and I think it's exactly the kind of performance where like it's a conventional rom-com and the Oscars just don't usually go for this genre very much. And you're like, man, Renee Zellweger was so good and she should have gotten that Oscar nomination. Like, you can imagine having that conversation with your friends. But in this case, it actually happened where the Academy wasn't so snobby for once, and they did recognize great work in a sort of standard rom-com. Not to say that this is just like basic necessarily, because I think this is a great rom-com, but I just think it's very inspired that they saw the work that she put into this without it feeling like, in her performance, it doesn't feel like effort in an artificial way, if that makes sense. Like, it's not overtly showy. She just is so charming and so fun, and she helps to elevate what could be a very standard take on Pride and Prejudice and makes it so watchable, and like you really care for her. Like, I care for her like immediately in watching this. I'm like, oh, I understand who this woman is, and I'm going to be here for her journey. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
That's all valid because she's just so damn likable. She's so damn charming. I would
Right.
compare it to Doris Day and Pillow Talk, where you're just like,
Yeah.
oh, this is so cute. But what sets Renee apart, her performance from other rom-com performances, she's just so not afraid of the cringe. There are so many cringe moments that
Yeah.
she just leans into, and you feel like you are her. It's so relatable. And you think, well, what makes a romantic performance romantic comedy performance that gets nominated different from those that are not. I think here, because it is sort of a transformation, that's sort of the baby element to this. But other than that, it's totally fresh. I love that they did this. It's shockingly rare when a romantic comedy performance gets into this category. And I just love this nomination. I think that you can tell she's having fun doing it, or at least it looks that way. She just makes you feel
Yeah.
like you are her. How many of us have felt like we were going to be single forever? How many of us had these insecurities just leap out and dealt with no good men who've done us wrong? Like, she captures all of that with such a whimsy and such a flair for the comedic beats necessary to do this. And again,
Yeah.
not British, not British, not British. That was a problem. It was like, you want smoke if you're tackling our stuff. And I saw Fritz, who I love. Hi, Fritz. I know you're listening. He was comparing this to when Vivian Lee, a Brit, came in and did our stuff, and it's like, okay,
I
let's
love
see what
that.
you're going to do. This is similar to that. This was a huge bestseller, a couple million copies worldwide. I think we forget that it's a phenomenon at this time. And she
Mhm.
was really taking a risk by doing this. And she unapologetically commits to all of it.
She really, really does. And the joy that she has within the performance is so infectious for me. Even just the image of her sitting in her matching red pajamas and she's got the cigarette in hand, Frasier's on the TV, All by Myself is playing, and her just getting more and more into the song and lip syncing. She's just so open and really exactly the kind of vibe when you're home alone and you're sick and tired of everything. It's that feels like the kind of scene where we see that kind of thing in a lot of rom-coms, but this specifically just really endears you to this character. Just the gusto she has as she's like lip syncing for her life. And I think her comedic timing is so precise and perfectly like cheeky British, like the wordplay of it all. Like her sort of like narrating about the author, Mr. Fitzherbert, and calling him tits pervert. Just like stumbling through her introductory speech at the book launch thing and being like, it's described as the greatest book of our time, other than yours, Salman Rushdie. And Salman Rushdie himself, like making a cameo as himself, giving like major side eye. But yeah, her freezing up and just like trying so badly not to say tits pervert. Like it's so broad, but she just lives in that awkwardness. She lives in the cringe, like you said, so beautifully.
Oh yeah, and that's why this movie was so huge. This made a couple $100 million worldwide in 2001. Like that was a lot of money and still would
We used to
be.
be a proper country. Yeah.
It was so good. And the moment that sticks out to me is when Colin Firth, she overhears him talking about her in that terrible matching outfit that she's wearing, and you just see her deflation. Those are the
Yeah.
moments that brought me in, were the moments of deflation, the moments of
Hmm.
self-loathing. We talk about this as a very lightweight performance, but underneath that, there's so much subtext. There's so much that
Yeah.
she's doing and bringing, and a darkness as well when you think of the gender
Hmm.
politics of this. And she's sitting at the table with all these couples. Like, why, Bridget, why are there so many women over 30 who are single? Like, what's that like? And she's having to sort of smile through it, and you can just sense the tightness and the discomfort, and again, cringe, cringe, cringe. She just doesn't run away from it. There's no vanity in this performance, and I think that resonated with people.
Yeah, I think so. It very much resonates with me. And yeah, some of that depth that you're speaking to, I think when she is alone with Hugh Grant in bed and talking about, kind of if they love each other. And he sort of plays it off, but she asks again, kind of like in this affected tone to sort of match that, like, oh, it's not that important to me, but it actually kind of is. I think, small moments like that are really quite revealing. And I think you see there just how kind of head over heels she is and how kind of old-fashioned romantic she is at heart. And he seems like a Prince Charming at first. He's very, dashing and fun to be around. But then when he abandons her at that, Tarts and Vickers party, and she doesn't get the memo that the theme of the party has been changed, so she shows up in the Playboy Bunny costume and she's humiliated. What I love there, though, is that she's still kind of confident enough to not just like hide away in shame necessarily. Like she kind of just like, well, here I am. I guess I'm just gonna hang out at this party in this costume and pretend like I don't have a ridiculous like mismatch of the vibe.
It was
I love
so
that.
funny when she walked in on Hugh Grant's other woman, and the
Mm-hmm.
woman's like, I thought you said she was thin. And I was like, what?
Oh my
Whoa,
god.
yikes. Like, whoa, whoa, whoa. And
Ay, ay, ay.
it was just really
Yeah.
heartbreaking, but her flowering throughout from beginning to end, the journey the character goes on, and the growth and confidence that is even there as you're talking about. It's just really
Mm-hmm.
enthralling to watch.
Yeah. Actually, I think she does nail that very precise thing that is like maybe not like firsthand experience, obviously, but just like from female friends I have and like, women's stories. The scene where she does show up to his apartment and she plays off how she said, I love you to him, but only because he didn't feel the same way. And she thinks he does have another woman in his apartment and she realizes, oh, maybe he doesn't. Maybe he is honest. And she kind of like forgives him in her mind a little bit and feels reassured and is like really just downplaying her own feelings and her own instincts and is just playing it off as like, oh, my mind is playing tricks on me. I'm sure it's fine. That I think is very real. And just like what she taps into there. And then, of course, like you said, actually does have a woman in his apartment and she's naked and she sees and she's like, great. Well, of course, like there it is.
And
I should have trusted my instincts. Like, I think that is very real. I'm just saying.
oh, absolutely. And the scene of her on the firefighter's pole, like going up it and then
Oh
staying
my
there. And then
god.
she's like, oh, I'm gonna work in TV. And the way she leaves that job where she's like, something about Saddam Hussein wiping his ass or whatever she said. It was just so funny. And then going into her on this pole with this firefighter hat, and then she's coming down the pole and her ass is all over TV, and she's like, oh, I've been humiliated again. And it's so funny. She makes these humiliating, cringing moments so funny. We've all been there, maybe not to that extreme, hopefully, but it's just so relatable.
Absolutely. Yeah. But then when eventually she does start to have those feelings for Mark, I think that is very well done. Just, very gradually opening herself up to him when he is revealing his feelings for her, saying, I think the line is like loving her just the way she is. It's this feeling of like, oh, you're just having a laugh, you're just saying it because it sounds nice, but like you see in his face, he is perfectly intentional in what he's saying, that he does love her just the way she is. And it's startling to her to have someone kind of like cut right through to her because she is so accustomed to this just feeling uncomfortable in her own skin. And now here's someone who is saying, you don't actually have to change all this, and this to be this perfect, ideal woman to be presentable to men. You can just be yourself. And for as cheesy as that could be, maybe, I think she really sweetly kind of portrays that realization moment of being like, oh, like maybe I can explore this with this guy.
Yeah. And when he says it, it's like he's saying that to the viewer, to you. And that's not all him. It's the way she reacts. You just feel it. If you've ever had an inch of insecurity, which who hasn't, you just relate to that moment in her eyes, how she reacts to that. Powerful stuff.
Yeah, it really is. And you're definitely there for her as the love triangle continues and, the whole knockout, drag out fight that Mark and Daniel have over her which is surprisingly violent, I must say. But I like how it kind of resolves with Daniel basically saying something about like, if I can't bag you, then like I'm hopeless, essentially. And she's like, actually, no, that's not a good enough offer, and that could have been very cheesy, I think, but she does earn this sort of like good for her sort of sentiment by the end of being like, yeah, I'm not going to keep treating myself like garbage just because a man is nice enough to like pity me in this moment.
Oh yeah, love this nomination. So much going on here.
Yeah.
Love this nomination. Love the ending.
Yeah.
Just so
Yes.
funny. Even though that was a very violent scene, I just found myself giggling. Like I smiled throughout this whole movie. It's just a ray of
You
sunshine.
can't not. I know. I know. It's, yeah, such a joy. Such a joyful nomination. Okay. Well, shall we get to our winner?
Oh yeah.
Deep sigh. Alrighty. Halle Berry in Monsters Ball. Here we go. So, history being made here with Halle Berry becoming the first Black woman to win the Oscar for Best Actress. And as I mentioned, here we are 23 years later and still the only. But to introduce her here, Halle Berry, born in Cleveland, Ohio. She broke into public eye as a model. So she was in several modeling contests, winning Miss Teen America, the 86, I think, and Miss Ohio, runner-up in Miss America. Having her modeling moment in the 80s, she was entered for Miss World. So by the late 80s, she's ready to sort of break into acting, and she has a few TV roles before making her film debut in Jungle Fever. She was in Strictly Business, she was in Boomerang, The Flintstones, and she's really starting to make a name for herself. So she has Losing Isaiah opposite Jessica Lange at one point. She does Executive Decision, Baps, Bulworth, Why Do Fools Fall in Love? And then in 1999, she is making her passion project, introducing Dorothy Dandridge, where she plays Dorothy Dandridge, who we, of course, talked about on the 54 episode, where she herself made history as the first Black nominee in Best Actress. And Halle wins an Emmy for it, and Golden Globe and SAG. It's a huge moment for her. And then the very next year, she's making her debut as Storm in X-Men, very important, which gives her a franchise on top of her very growing respect as an actress. And in 2001, she's in Swordfish earlier in the year, and now Monsters Ball. And she's very acclaimed, gets that nomination. She's the 7th Black actress to be nominated in this category. So Monsters Ball, a lot to unpack here. It's about a corrections officer, Hank, played by Billy Bob Thornton, who is racist and living in Georgia. And he is with his kind of a little bit more sensitive son, Sonny, Heath Ledger, and his even more racist father, played by Peter Boyle. He puts a convicted Black man to death, Lawrence Musgrove, played by Sean Diddy Coates himself. And we follow Lawrence's widow, Letitia, Halle Berry, who struggles to pay the bills and raise her son, Tyrell. Eventually, there are multiple tragedies that bring Hank and Letitia together. Hank finds out that she's the widow of this man that he put to death, but chooses not to say anything as they develop a stronger connection and become intimate. And Hank, I guess, sort of starts to change his views through this experience, maybe. And she takes comfort in Hank. So yeah, let's get into it here, Isaiah. Halle Berry. Thoughts on Halle Berry overall and her big history-making performance here in Monsters Ball?
You know, there's a lot that could be said about Halle Berry as a movie star, first of all, and about this
Mm-hmm.
performance. And I love this woman. I love Halle Berry. I remember being little and seeing Losing Isaiah and thinking it was me and she was my mom. I
Oh.
remember just looking at her as being just this beautiful, graceful movie star, like the only one of her kind to sort of transcend race, whatever that means, if only for a moment,
Mm.
like just to be a Black actress at that level at that time. It was huge, it was monumental. There's a lot that I can say about this performance again, and a lot that I have to say. I think as I said to you before, that we would be having a very, very different discussion about this if she were not the only one. Because she's
Mhm.
the only one, there's a lot that has to come up with that. And it changes the context of this performance, right? This
Mhm.
movie is wild. This movie asks her to sell some crazy lines, scenes, choices, and she does it. She sells it. And again, this script is doing her absolutely no favors. It's stereotype on top of stereotype on top of stereotype. Two things can be true at once, right? Like, I can say, I, as much as one can, see the merit in the movie, even if it has its problems. But she just does so much. Like, we talked about actresses making shit work in this year. She really, 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 really has a lot that she's shouldering here because this is a
Mhm.
mess. I mean, this like, if we're just talking about what's on paper, like, I can only imagine her thinking, what am I going to do with this? And she sought after this role. And when you think of the women considered for this, Vanessa Williams, Whitney Houston, Angela Bassett, wildly different versions of the movie there that we can imagine. But Angela Bassett sort of
Mhm.
sets this tone of, and justifiably so as a Black woman, her saying, well, Meryl got her Oscar without doing all of that. This is a very
Mhm.
tricky conversation to have, which is why I wanted to
Yeah.
come on and discuss this here in particular. But I invite everyone who has their valid critiques of this to really look at what she's doing because she's doing a lot. There's more going on than the shock value of the movie. She really transcends it. And I think that deserves applause.
I very much agree. As I have said many times, the category is called Best Actress, not Best Actress in a great movie. So yeah, Halle Berry, I definitely was introduced to her in my childhood as Storm in X-Men. Loved her as Storm. Things like Die Another Day and even Catwoman and like Flintstones. And to your points, kind of like introduced to her as that movie star and knowing her as this beautiful, charismatic star. And it wasn't until later that I saw this and some other things that I saw the full extent of her as an actress. I also think to a certain extent that Hollywood hasn't allowed her to fully explore everything yet, even to this day. But I think this is a perfect example of a great performance in a bad movie, and why sometimes it's okay to reward great performances in bad movies because the script is not her fault. Why the script was nominated for an Oscar too, I will never understand, but that's neither here nor there. The direction is not her fault either. She is putting in the work, and she's working very hard to show why she's more than just, a former pageant girl and for her beauty. And I think even though you can sense maybe that desire to prove herself, I don't think that gets in the way of me thinking this is a really, really good performance. And I think she single handedly carries this very flawed movie on her shoulders and fills in so many gaps that are missing in this script that is way too focused on Hank and the sort of false redemption that happens for him rather than what I think is a more interesting perspective, which is how Letitia is grappling with all of this. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like if this was flipped, I think this would be a much more interesting and probably better movie.
Oh, yeah. And she conveys it all. She's given
Yeah.
so little and she conveys it all. And the way this movie ends, spoiler alert. But if you're listening to this, you watch along with us. That's what I do when I listen to this podcast. But
Yeah.
um, and in the end, I don't know if he has ice cream or pudding, but when she
Ice cream.
accepts
Yeah.
it, that look of just complete like nobody else is gonna love me. Like this self-loathing, like let me just accept love in whatever package it comes. I've had such a
Yeah.
hard life. She doesn't say any of that, and yet it's there. making this choice of just finding love in the lowest of the low places. This character who's willing to be humiliated, who's willing to be fetishized because she just wants to be loved. No one has loved her. And this man, does he? I don't know. But she is willing for some reason to overlook like he's killed your husband, he's in law enforcement, he's throwing around the n-word, and his father talks to you crazy, and
Oh yeah, yeah.
you're not given lines to be like, what am I supposed to be doing as an actress here? Right. But she conveys all of it. Every tear, every scream, just the depths of despair. And it's not always successful. The scene that made me kiki, that is that is not at all funny. Should not be funny. It's terrible. The scene with her son who dies randomly, like it's just horrific
Yeah.
episode after horrific episode. That scene where I think he's hiding food and she's grasping at his breasts and at his stomach, like, you're fat, you're fat, you're fat. It's like,
Yeah.
that was a mess, Halle. Not even Halle Berry could sell that. That was a damn mess. um,
Yeah.
it was a damn mess. I think, though,
Mhm.
like, she does her best, because what is one supposed to do? It does focus
Yeah.
on Billy Bob Thornton. There are so many confusing messages here. I almost didn't know whether to
Yeah.
think her performance was good or bad when I first saw it, because, I'm just so off put by this. Like, it's so
Mhm.
layered.
Yeah.
It's not as simple as how it's been portrayed, which is, this should be like this revolutionary thing where everyone in the Black community looks at this performance like, oh my God, what a revolution. But again, as we'll talk
Mhm.
about later in context, this has not been a well reviewed, like, this is a polarizing performance in my slice of the Black community. But I think even with that, she's doing so much to humanize this character, as so many of the Black actress nominees have done. They're doing so much to compensate for what is not there. And I think that's something to be applauded. I think the things that are there racially
Yeah.
are empty at best. It doesn't
Yeah.
interrogate what her thought process is of laying down with this man. It just gives us this graphic sex scene that seems to go on and on and on and on. And it's like,
Yeah.
I don't know what to do with this. Like, I didn't necessarily have like a negative reaction to it. I love a good sex scene, but I'm just sitting there like, I don't know what this is. So interesting that this is the only thing a Black woman has ever won for. Again,
Yeah.
Glenda Jackson had been took her titties out 30 years earlier. Women in Love, a win that
Sure.
I enjoy. That's a top 10 win for
Thank
me.
you.
So we
Yes.
can have those conversations around like nudity in the best actress category. But my question
Yeah.
watching this was, where was Halle Berry's Erin Brockovich? Where was Halle
Ugh,
Berry's
I
Bridget
know.
Jones? It
Mhm.
makes me really sad, but I don't think that in any way diminishes or erases the fact that I was glued to the screen with the movie. It can be read as lurid and exploitative. I don't think Halle Berry fits into the world of the script. It's odd. You have this supermodel walking around a trailer park and you're like,
Right.
this shouldn't work, but somehow it does.
I think so. Yeah. And we get these glancing moments in terms of sort of the racial politics of it all. Like when, after he brings her back to her house, after this tragedy of losing her son has happened, and he kind of is like reassuring her, like, oh, the police are going to do an autopsy and they'll figure out who hit your son and everything. And I like how she's like, you really think the police are going to go out of their way? He's a Black kid. Like, it's kind of like she knows the score. She knows how the world works. Sadly, I think it's in the way that she carries herself with that sense of sort of like resignation, almost, of feeling like there is no justice, there is no hope, like it's all rigged against me. And do I wish that maybe she had some more opportunities to balance some of that out with humor and lightness? Yes, because I think for as bad as things can get, you do find a way to make things easier for yourself and look for happiness where you can. And it's just a problem I also have with the film, and more than her performance, is to, because like she can only do so much, but like I feel like the only scene where she gets more of an opportunity to do some of that is like when she brings him inside and she's got all the whiskey shots and tells him about the curtains that she got on credit and everything and how she loves those curtains. But like things like that I feel like are very brief, and I feel like we're just lingering so much on the grief and the trauma and just like piling it on and on and on. And I feel like after a while she can sort of only do so much with that and make it interesting and not have it feel redundant.
Oh, yeah,
So
absolutely. I completely agree with all of that. Some levity would have been welcomed. I don't know where it would have been placed because, his son dies, her son dies, N word, N word, N word, da da da,
yeah,
graphic,
I
sexy.
know,
Like, I
I
don't
know.
know. I don't,
And I also
I don't
almost don't want
know.
to imagine this movie's version of what humor would be. So like maybe it's
Yeah.
okay that there isn't.
It's so tonally strange. Like in that
Yeah.
moment where she does welcome him in and she is trying to, have her little jokes and laugh
Hmm.
stuff. She's still talking about her dead son's weight. So your son
Yeah. He was so fat.
your child is dead, and immediately after you're with this man and you don't know what you don't know yet, but you're
Right.
cracking jokes about your son's weight, so even in death he can't catch a break. And that was something she also just couldn't sell. Like that moment of levity, it was like, what tone is this? Like, I don't
Mm,
really, again, I didn't know what to do with this performance. I don't think anybody
right.
knows what to do. If you really look back and you pull back, it's one of the strangest best actress wins. So tonally bizarre.
Hmm.
Alongside just the relentless tragedy, tragedy, tragedy. But she's never stagnant. She's never static.
Yeah.
She does
Hmm.
evolve and find levels and nuances within that, which must have been very challenging.
Oh yeah. This is one of those like, she had back pain from carrying this movie on her shoulders. It's just like I can't even imagine. But
Broken
with that sort
back.
of right, yeah, right. But just the left turn after left turn of navigating that centerpiece sequence of them eventually sleeping together is really wild. But I do think for the most part she acquits herself nicely there, with that left turn where she begs him over and over to make her feel good and is taking her clothes off and is like climbing on him. And yes, it's a very lengthy sex scene, kind of brutal to watch because she is drunk and he knows that he was involved in the sort of process of ending her husband's life and all that, doesn't tell her, so that's complicated. But regardless of any of that, I think she does weirdly sell it for me. Like she really just commits so much to it. It's sort of like the Nicole Kidman conversation where I'm just like, bravo for really going full force with this. I don't love when they like very directly tell each other like I needed you, things like that, because it just feels so on the nose. But it's a really, really showy and great scene for her. And I think it is probably what impressed voters the most in watching that. So it's interesting that, Sissy Spacek and Halle Berry kind of have these huge centerpiece sequences that could have won or lost them the Oscar here. And enough voters were impressed by this one more so than Sissy, which is interesting.
It's a very brave performance for sure.
Yeah.
Just so the
Yeah.
level of commitment, like you're saying, is just through the roof. I don't, again, not to focus on the sex scene, which again, I feel like that's most of what I knew about this going in. Like that's what everyone
Yeah.
talks about, even more so than her being the only black woman or biracial woman like to win.
Hmm.
Um, that was what was talked about every interview. Like if you go back, that was the conversation. And
Hmm.
she had to know that. And
Oh
the
yeah.
and it was like realistic. It was like, is this like porn? Like, and it's so sad that
Should I be
that's
watching this? Yeah,
yeah,
right.
like the fact that that was a lot of people's takeaway is sad because again,
I
there's
know.
so much going on here, but the acting in that she did eat, like she was full blown committed, like making that insane. Even the placement of the scene where it's like, why is this happening immediately after this death? Was wild. Uh,
Yeah,
but she
choices.
sells it. Like you said, she
Hmm.
she sells it.
Oh yeah, she really, really does. I mean, I don't really buy the relationship sort of evolving and moving forward after that necessarily. I don't know about if you have thoughts on the just the fact that they are having a connection in that way. Like I know that they both have a shared trauma of losing important people to them, but like I don't know if I fully buy like the way that the relationship goes forward necessarily. To me, this is a movie where I'm just like, okay, these two people are bound by tragedy and they have this one experience and then they go their separate ways after that. Like, I don't really see this as something that's like, oh, we're going to have a relationship necessarily after this. So that's where I also struggle.
Yeah, I think that their chemistry is all that sells it. I think they have great chemistry. Like, if after Angelina, Billy Bob and her had dated,
Oh boy.
like I wouldn't necessarily like on paper I'd be like, oh, that's a weird combination. But in practice, they do have chemistry. And in order to be that exposed and that vulnerable, you have to have some chemistry, right? But again, on the page,
Right.
unbelievable. Like, I'm sorry, just completely didn't buy it.
Yeah.
Because that was wild. Like, it was just so much going on. Like,
Hmm.
wow. I wish I could be more articulate about it. But what can be said? I just
Yeah.
really, their chemistry was remarkable, but everything other than that, like the words on the page, the arc of the characters and how we get there. I didn't buy it, but their performances. But I think he should have been nominated. I think Heath Ledger should have been nominated. Like the
Mm-hmm.
script being nominated,
For
we can
sure.
talk about later what that was. But I
Yeah.
did not buy the characters going on that journey of, oh, we're just gonna sit on
Yeah.
this porch and end up together. I don't know if she wins without that ending, though.
Fair. I think she does nail it, though. To your point, when she does discover these drawings that her husband had made of him in his house, and just that initial shock of putting it all together in her mind and just processing that without words, without us having to have it be overly explained to us. Thank God this is at least one element of the film that isn't overly explaining and like maneuvering things like God in that way. But yeah, her navigating her way to how she feels about it and sort of resolving to be okay and to not really acknowledge it to him for now. She does all of that just with a few looks. So that's talent, you know?
Absolutely. And she's so talented. I just wish she had a better vehicle to showcase that talent. And the
Yes,
Oscar
me too.
role for Halle Berry is the Emmy role, which was Dorothy Dandridge. I
Oh,
mean,
yeah.
and we'll
Mm-hmm.
talk more about that later, but that to me is like the apex of what she was capable of. It is strange that this movie in this moment in time was the thing that got her to be taken seriously in the mainstream as more than this bombshell. Very interesting, but this was
Yeah.
it, and that people were willing to say, I believe this journey. I'm going along with this. Like, what was that about? right?
Great question. Yeah. Well, I think we should transition right into talking about the Oscars and this win. A lot to discuss here. But for the precursors, starting with the Critics Awards, Sissy Spacek got off to a very good start. She did very well. She won the New York Film Critics, the LA Film Critics, Vancouver. She was kind of the critics' darling of this group. Halle Berry won National Board of Review. And then with the major precursors, Sissy Spacek kind of continued her run, winning Critics' Choice and the Golden Globe, including over Halle Berry. Nicole Kidman won the other Golden Globe for comedy musical. And then Halle Berry won at SAG, which was very interesting. So she had the respect of her fellow peers, at least. And Judi Dench, not that BAFTA had a lot of overlap at that time, but Judi Dench won at BAFTA. Likely thing for her to win. So it was a really fun sort of split race going into the Oscars. Halle Berry has said in retrospect that she really thought that Sissy Spacek was going to win. But let's jump right into it here. Why do we think Halle Berry was our winner from this group?
This is gonna be hard. Like, some people aren't gonna like me talking about the reasons why she may have won and why this hasn't happened again. I think that it's hard to have this conversation without just being honest. I think that, well, first of all, it was a comeback sort of moment because she had had legal trouble.
Mm-hmm.
She had been divorced. She lived where I am in Cincinnati when she was with David Justice. She had all these tabloid things happen, very similar to Nicole Kidman, and she came back and gave people something that they simply were not expecting from her. That's the surface level. It does stand out from the other performances, and that she goes so far. How do you compete with that? Like, everyone went far, but she sort of went like far, far, far
Mm-hmm.
as what she was willing to do. And it shocked people. I think it did take the industry aback to see Halle Berry in this mode because she really got to do her most exciting work up to this point on television. So it was a surprise, but it was looked at after her legal trouble. I think it was a hit and run incident. I'm not, don't quote me on
Mm-hmm.
that. Something went down, but she was able to come back and sort of have this moment. And then it gets dark when you really look at the coverage of, there's a narrative forming that still exists in certain circles of Black thought that she had to humiliate herself to win. Again, I think that this was looked at as a humiliating film. I think that if she were not the only one, this would be very different. It's been suggested that the mostly male older white Oscar voters were aroused by the scene, and that was why she won. Monique said that
Oh, no.
Monique was like, um, she cooked breakfast for the Academy. Lee Daniels was behind it, and the campaigning was very much trading on her looks and like this focus on this scene, because she has a bunch of Oscar clips in this, and yet that
Yeah.
scene is the one that got the most attention. Jay Leno himself said he was excited by the scene, so I think people were excited
Mm.
sexually by the movie, which is really, really, really sad, which complicates it even more.
Yeah.
And Lee Daniels, speaking of, the next Black woman to be nominated in lead is Gabourey Sidibe, which is also considered in some circles to be humiliating. I'm not necessarily saying like, oh, I think that it's that simple or I think it's humiliating, because these are great performances, right? But when you look at what Black women have been nominated for in supporting and lead, it's really disturbing. And I don't think a lot of
Yeah.
people, other than us, right, who are nerds, like, we don't peel back and, take a step back and just look at the list of the women
Yeah.
going back to Dorothy Dandridge. That was a controversial role in Carmen Jones. Her and Halle Berry born in the same hospital in Cleveland. But that was a controversial role. She was considered, a wanton woman, and the NAACP protested, and she was sleeping with Otto Preminger to get that part. So we have that, and then we have Diana Ross playing a drug addicted singer. We have Cicely Tyson playing a woman whose husband goes to prison and she's in the segregated South, sharecropping, not glamorous at all. Diane Carroll's playing, a single mother on welfare. Some Whoopi Goldberg's playing Celie, iconic, but an abuse victim. An abuse victim when Angela Bassett's nominated, and other than that, a lot of domestic roles in supporting slaves, even as recently as 2024. So no one's taking away from the merit of these women who are incredible women to have this conversation of a lot of Black people feel, again, not necessarily me, but a lot of Black people feel like, okay, this is what an Oscar comes with, some form of humiliation for Black women. And when only one has won in over 90 years, it's not a good look. It does look that way. So there were a lot of factors. I'm so interested to hear your thoughts about that because it's not an easy conversation.
No, no, it's definitely not. And also, to your point, when you do look at some roles from Black actresses that got buzz, such as Lupita Nyong'o for Us or Alfre Woodard for Clemency, I think you have the fact that they didn't get in. And for example, you have from that same year, Cynthia Erivo getting in for playing Harriet Tubman. I think it does create an interesting thing to discuss. What is valued by a still predominantly white Academy in Black actresses? So yeah, it's heavy and it's thorny. It is a fascinating thing to talk about just because, first of all, Sissy Spacek was sort of thought of as a front runner for a little bit. She was making her comeback, very traditional, kind of like impressively dramatic performance in a film strong enough to get into Best Picture, all of that. But for Halle, it was this small movie, but a movie that, from what I could see, kind of did connect with people in a more directly emotional way, and she was encouraged, from what I was reading, to push herself as a potential history maker. She appeared on Oprah before the nominations, and Oprah really gave her endorsement. She said she put Halle Berry's name in great big bold black letters on her nomination ballot. But, then there was Miramax and Harvey Weinstein really pushing hard for Sissy Spacek. I was actually reading in Michael Schulman's book Oscar Wars about how Weinstein apparently kind of like conceded the Oscar to the Lionsgate campaigner and was like, you beat us. So that's kind of interesting. I think there was definitely an effort to make this happen for her. And I do think that is undeniable. But I think when you do just look at the performance, it's very sympathetic as a character, I would say. I don't know how much we talked about that necessarily, but just the sequence when she does get drunk and she has sex in the middle of the film, it is very overly showy and impressive. And I think it helps that her public image was that of former beauty queen who was in the tabloids a lot, not always take it seriously. And now here she is proving her worth. And yes, maybe there was some element of titillation within the Academy, and I think that is difficult to discuss, but it is sometimes a factor. It just is. And so I think ultimately she just has, as odd as it sounds, just kind of like the easiest narrative to kind of glom onto and feel like you're feeling good about supporting within this group, I suppose. She kind of is giving them a reason to vote for her, because her narrative combined with this narrative of there never being a Black actress ever having won, all of these things kind of combined to make this happen for her. And so, yeah, it's really, really tricky, but it's a great moment individually just to watch her have that moment at the Oscars and to realize the gravity of it and to know what to say to honor the Dorothy Dandridges and the Diane Carrolls and the people who were alongside her, like Angela Bassett, despite what she would say later, and Jada Pinkett Smith, and all these women, and feeling like a door was being opened in this moment, even though she has now said in retrospect that she may have been naive in thinking that that was possible.
It's so tricky because it is this huge moment. It's this iconic speech and that gown and the
Iconic.
bottom. And
Yes.
then,
Yes.
she's naming these women, and it's like no other Oscars quite like that has happened again for Black representation. Whoopi was hosting, Sidney Poitier was honored, Denzel won also for what some call a stereotypical role. But this was, I think, a moment of celebration that hasn't quite been duplicated again. I mean, a Black male and female winner. I can't even imagine that happening now or who it would be. I mean, this was huge. This was so
Yeah.
huge. And I think that people really felt good about voting for Halle Berry. I don't know how
Yeah.
much of it was anyone really thinking about her race from a voting standpoint. I wonder if there was someone in the Academy who was like, this is a Black woman. We need to nominate her. She needs to win. I don't know how much of that was in it. She was also just a really big movie star with a lot of promise,
Mm-hmm.
and it is a transformation. She is not wearing makeup. She's deglamming. That element is very present too.
Yeah.
And again, just it is this commitment of a performance. Like she makes this nonsense work. And I think that, they obviously did like the script of the movie. So a lot of the things that may bother us from a contemporary lens clearly didn't bother them if the
Right.
script is nominated. Um, but she's really, really wonderful in this. And I think ultimately I would give the win to her because she just, that level of commitment. And she, again, I want to say this too, like, yes, not she's not the only Best Actress winner where there was that titillation element
Yeah.
that may have been there. People were having that conversation around one of the greatest performances of all time, which is Natalie Portman. Like that conversation was happening this
Mm-hmm.
year with Emma Stone.
Yep.
So that's very hard to pin down and say something concrete about this definitively is or isn't. That's hard to place. It did look that way, but I think that undercuts the real craft of what she did. There was clearly
Yeah.
craft happening.
Yeah. I completely agree. And I think it's unfortunate kind of like what happened to her in the aftermath of this Oscar win. As many people know, she did not have the kind of career that she deserved moving forward from this. And of course, I did just want to talk about some of the comments that Angela Bassett made after the fact, of saying that she was offered the role in Monsters Ball, that she specifically said she didn't want to play a prostitute on
Mhm.
film, which is not technically what Halle Berry is doing here, but she does say, it was such a stereotype about Black women and sexuality. And kind of the most damning statement of all is she said, I would love to have an Oscar, but it has to be for something I can sleep with at night.
She got dragged in the Black
Yeah.
press for this. This, again, was
Mm-hmm.
not like, oh my God, first Black woman to win. Like, yes, there was some of that there, but it was really interesting. Vanessa Williams said, I didn't want my children to see me up there getting rammed. Like, the
Yeah.
sexuality of this and the Jezebel stereotype around like
Mm-hmm.
Black women being overly sexualized. Again, if you had given it to Angela Bassett in the 90s, if you had given it to like a variety of Black woman performances, I think we'd be having a very different conversation. I think if
Yeah,
Halle Berry had a better career, we'd be having a different conversation. But she
for
sort of
sure.
lost a lot of Black support. So she wasn't really making a ton of Black films, and other than the X-Men franchise, she hasn't been given the opportunity to show all that she can do, which makes this very sad. And Halle Berry talked about that She talked about the backlash. She said in an interview with the New York Times a few years ago, I don't know how much this mattered, or I don't think it mattered. And that broke my heart
I
because
know.
a lot of, older Black actresses from that generation who were in their 50s, who I talked to, said their takeaway from this was not necessarily, oh, I can do it too. It was, oh, that's what you have to do. That's what they expect. And what message is the Academy sending when this is the only one? It's really, really sad. And I don't know if that was anybody's intention. I don't think the Academy has an intention that we can logically pin down with a lot of these wins. And it's fun to
No.
talk about it, but you don't quite know why all the time. It's a perfect storm. But it is interesting to hear Angela Bassett's comments and, you know, she was offered the role. Would have been a very different movie, but there was this element of we're not going to give Angela Bassett the win for what's love got to do with it. She has to do this, and it's on
Mm.
top of this is a racially fraught time. Every time in America is a racially fraught time, but you're adding and compounding all of this stuff around the sex scene, and it's in the South, and he's a cop, and it's not
Mhm.
just it's interracial. It's that there's an age difference. There's a lot going on here, which is why I'm sort of
Yeah.
people look at this as humiliating, and I think there's more nuance to it than that. But
Yeah.
I understand why someone would be offended because it is the only one.
Yeah. That's really well said. I don't have a lot to add on to that. I think that's what makes this so fascinating is that you can look at this through so many different lenses, even beyond the performances themselves, and what it all just
Absolutely.
looking at what it all means culturally and as a trend. So, on that note, maybe we'll explore a little more of that in these Twitter questions. So, we got quite a few for this year because this is a big, big year. Starting here with Fritz, who
Hi,
said,
Fritz.
Fritz said, "Is this quietly a really fantastic lineup?"
Oh, yeah. Like we said in the beginning, there is not a bad performance here
Yeah,
whatsoever. And it's very different generations. It's sort of evenly split as much as five nominees can be between old and new. You have Judi Dench and Sissy Spacek, they're two different generations. You have, the Halle Berrys and Nicole Kidmans and Renee's who are contemporaries. That's what makes a good Best Actress lineup to me, that it's well-rounded with the variety of the work and also with the actresses that are there and what they represent. It's great.
yeah, I agree. Maybe not an all-timer necessarily for me, but it is also a really starry lineup. It's actresses who, for the most part, have thrived. So I think that tends to help certain lineups age better than others. So both Alicia Martinez and Jamie want to know, Halle won on her only nomination, but are there other performances of hers that are nomination worthy for us?
Oh my goodness. Yes. I mean, first of all, when I was little, I had a Catwoman coloring book.
Oh boy.
I had, I'm not saying that was Oscar worthy. I'm saying, as a little gay boy, I had a big Catwoman poster, on my. I love Catwoman, but if Dorothy Dandridge had been a feature, it makes
Yeah,
sense. It would have gotten her nomination. I don't know if she would have won because that's haunting in many ways. There's a lot, I'm very hippy dippy. So it's the spiritual connections between her and Dorothy just come through in that film. It's a biopic.
totally.
I
Hmm.
think it was a very baby role. I don't know how that was a TV movie because TV movies in 1999 versus now, it's not the same prestige. There was no streaming. It wasn't necessarily considered, the best avenue. And yet she soared in a world where big screen actors and TV actors were considered separate categories of performers. I think if that had been a feature, that would have been the one.
I was going to say the exact same thing. If Introducing Dorothy Dandridge was released in theaters, I think she at least gets a nomination. Yeah. I mean, I haven't seen everything she's done, but to me, that is her best performance. And just how easily she also just slips into that era, and just the depth of emotion she gets to there, and just even the scenes of her like recreating the filming of Carmen Jones. It is eerie how much she channels Dorothy Dandridge. Like, it really is. So yeah, kind of a shame that that didn't get a theatrical release. But Fritz also asked, did Halle benefit from having the best final scene?
That's interesting. Did she have the best final scene in your opinion out of like, do you think she had the best final scene?
I do enjoy Renée Zellweger's final scene.
Yeah, me
Just saying.
too.
But just in terms of traditional like acting showcase, then probably would be the best, or at least the most impactful, where she's making clear choices.
Oh yeah, definitely probably the most memorable. I think voters
Yeah,
walked away from it like, wow, a lot of the really great acting happens around there, when she
right.
finds out and when she sees the drawings. And again, that last moment with the ice cream, it's just total surrender and self-loathing and so much going on there. So I think
Yeah.
her scene stuck with people. I don't know if it was the best. How can you not like Renee Zellweger running through the snow with no pants into Colin Firth's arms? Like
I
that
know. I
to
know.
me was just great.
Yeah. Yeah. Ben Roberts asks, has Halle Berry got the worst post-Oscar winning career of any modern actress?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I was gonna say sort of, because like I don't want to fully like blame her for that necessarily, you know. But you know what? I'm gonna be perfectly honest and say another one that I think has not had the best post-Oscar career is Brie Larson, who, post Room to me has been very shaky. Like, she's fine as Captain Marvel, get that money, she's fine in Lessons in Chemistry. I just don't think she's been able to get to that peak again. And I don't know why that is, because she seems like she could have been pulling in these really incredible sort of continuing that sort of level of prestige, I guess is what I'm trying to say, that she had in Room, but it just hasn't happened. And I don't know why.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I'm not the biggest Brie Larson. That win to me was like, I wasn't
Mm-hmm.
really because I wanted like more of the like basement and hiding stuff, and then when we got out of the basement, I don't think
Mm,
she really had anywhere to go. But I agree that she could have had, a better career. I think sometimes with these awards, that is the peak, and then the industry doesn't know what to do. I think that Hillary
yeah.
Swank has had a hard time, and I enjoy
Oh, yeah.
her wins. Like Boys Don't Cry was not necessary. I mean, I guess you can technically say, oh, that was 2000 when the ceremony took place.
Mm-hmm.
Th- she should have worked constantly after that in Million Dollar Baby,
Yeah.
and things just don't always shake out, whether it's the actors' choices or what's available. I don't think the industry always knows what to do with these women.
Mark Lamb said, Halle Berry's post Oscar career hasn't been stellar. Is there an Oscar winning role from the next 10 years that would have at least gotten Halle another nomination? I actually have one that is relevant to what you just said, which is, I think if Halle Berry is in Million Dollar Baby, I think she probably gets that second nomination.
Yo, that would have been fire because she just directed herself in that kickboxing movie.
Right.
That would have
Bruised.
been Bruce.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would have been completely fire. I mean,
Right?
I have a very weird sense of humor, so everyone has to follow me with this. I don't think anyone's gonna find this as funny as you and I might. But unfortunately, a very dark, humorous answer would be the help. Like, I think if she had been ready to
Oh,
put on
boy.
that apron,
Oh, brother.
maybe the Academy would have been like, oh, now I can see
Oh
Now I can
boy.
see what she does. Like maybe had she played a maid, she would have got a nomination. So, I
Yeah.
mean, unfortunately, that's just how the cookie crumbles. I mean,
Yeah.
I think that uh, I would like to have seen her do, something like maybe if she was the one playing Coretta Scott King in Selma, that would have worked out as a nomination for her.
Mm.
Carmen was sort
Hmm.
of not as high profile. Something like that, maybe, but
Yeah.
not a lot of options, unfortunately.
Right. Jamie said, if Halle doesn't prevail here, do you think the narrative of breaking the glass ceiling propels any other black actress to a win in the years after?
Maybe Viola for The Help. That's the
Yep.
closest I think anyone has come.
Yeah, it is. And I think that is the answer. Like, there's no other. Yeah, I don't know if Gabourey Sidibe would have done it. Yeah, I think that's it. Christopher Perkins said Roger Ebert loved Monsters Ball. He chose it as his number one film of 2001. How much influence do you think his show at the movies had on Oscar voters? Also, which director do you think could help Halle Berry make an Academy comeback?
I love this question. I'm going to answer the last part first.
Okay.
One of the big reasons not a lot of black actresses has been nominated. Like, I don't think it's like a conspiracy. I don't think anyone really thinks about it because, again, they're not looking at these statistics when they vote necessarily. I
Right.
don't think it's something that crosses anyone's mind, which is also in its own way fascinating. One of the reasons that a lot of black actresses don't get nominated, a lot of them don't get the opportunity to work with these prestige directors that the Academy likes. I mean, is Martin Scorsese and Quentin Tarantino outside of Jackie Brown, like, are they clamoring to write these roles where a black woman would make sense? I'm excited to see what Regina Hall does in that Paul Thomas Anderson movie, but how often does that opportunity come up? So I would
Right.
love to see her work with Spike Lee again. Word on the curb is that she might be, but that's not confirmed. Um, I would love to see her work with Scorsese. I would love to see her work with, Pablo Lorraine. I would love to see
Ooh.
her work with all of the directors that she deserves to. She's so damn talented. So it takes the right director, I think. But I think that Roger Ebert helped because he was the premier critic, and him
Mm-hmm.
propping her up like this for whatever reason. I don't know why he put this movie at number one when like In the Bedroom was right there. Like, if we're talking movies, I don't know, but that definitely helped.
Yeah, he was a tastemaker, I think. I think for directors that could help her come back, I agree with what you said. I mean, I would also add in like a Barry Jenkins, that would be one. But really anyone like Steven Spielberg, Todd Field, Greta Gerwig, it could be anyone. And that's another thing is I do think she has the versatility to adapt herself to all of their different styles. So give her a chance, is what we're saying.
Please do. If
Uh,
anyone's listening to this, please put Halle Berry in one of these movies. Like,
yeah,
if she had done the Zendaya role in Malcolm and Marie, but they were older and it was her and Denzel going back and forth, and the movie was just better, I
Jesus.
think she gets
Whew.
nominated. I think she wins
Yeah,
in 2020.
I love that. Wow, wow. That just created a whole other alternate timeline there. Wow. Um, Andy Bayless said, all of these actresses have Oscars now. Would you swap any of their wins for a win for their roles here? Well, I'm not going to say who, but yes, I'll say that. I'll save that till the end of the show, where I will reveal who I would have voted for from
Me
this lineup.
too.
Okay, we'll put a pin in that. Okay. Jamie said, are Judy's iris bangs the worst in Best Actress history? What are the top 5 worst Best Actress wigs?
Oh, I have to think about that one.
Yeah. I feel
I
bad talking about her bangs. It's
yeah.
Iris Murdoch. It's her hairstyle. Like, what can we say? Um,
Yeah,
It's
I
fine.
liked her hair in that. I
Yeah.
thought it was a cute little bob. I liked
Yeah.
Judi Dench's hair, so I'm not gonna drag Judi Dench's hair.
Yeah.
I love Glenda Jackson. Um, and I love the Jane Fonda Clue bangs and Shaq, but
Yes.
not much. I don't necessarily think they're cute. I love the hairstyle because they're iconic, but I don't necessarily, I'm not like, oh, I need that wig. Or if it was a wig, I don't know.
Right. I would add in Meryl Streep in A Cry in the Dark. Not great. Not great.
Didn't like her
Um,
Silkwood wig either.
yeah, she's had a few that are like, okay, Meryl. I mean, Nicole Kidman and Being the Ricardos, I didn't find very convincing personally, but
That was a
um,
mess. A
yeah,
mess.
yeah,
Wig or no wig. That was like, I
yeah,
don't get that.
yeah. Also, like a random one, but like Michelle Pfeiffer in Love Field.
Oh
I
yeah,
just
bad
don't
wig.
love. Yeah, that just literally looks like a wig, so that's not great.
Bad
Um,
wig. And Jessica Lange's wig that she wears at the end of an Oscar win, I enjoy when she pulled her black hair out in, I'm blanking on the title of the movie that she won 94, uh,
Blue Sky.
Blue Sky. Sorry, I'm sure
Yeah,
many of us have blanked on the name of that. That win is fire, you
that's fair.
guys. But
Yeah,
that wig was ugly.
yeah, that wig was wigging. Yeah. Homo Suspiria said, "Why is this Nicole's first nomination? Did she have any shot for To Die For or Eyes Wide Shut? If she had a prior nomination, might it have improved her chances for a win here?" I don't think it would have improved her chances that much if she had another nomination before this. But yeah, I think she just wasn't enough of a prestige type of actress to enough people in the industry yet until now. So that maybe explains why it's her first.
Absolutely. And I think that for other movies, Eyes Wide Shut was polarizing. That would
Oh,
never
yeah.
have had the Academy industry support, even though we all know that should have been. But some would say To Die For. I would say the Eyes Wide Shut with her and Tom Cruise's like marriage just on display, and it's like how much of this is acting. That's the
Right.
closest I've ever come to being a Nicole Kidman stan. I think the reason she didn't win for this was because it was too much. Like I would imagine people having a hard time sitting through. It was just a lot going on, and some
Right.
people maybe do feel like she sort of got lost. A lot of people walk away from Moulin Rouge talking about Baz Luhrmann and what an accomplishment that was
Right.
directorially,
Good
but I
point.
think it wasn't everybody's cup of tea. It was pop cinema, but her name was all over the headlines. It was sort of somewhat of a comeback and being taken seriously. So the nomination was big. The movie was a big hit. But I just don't think she would have won or anyone would have won for this kinetic MTV movie.
No. Yeah. It's not exactly the kind of acting win that we see very much. The ghost of Glenda Miss Jackson, if you nasty, said, if this award was for biggest achievement in slaying, would Nicole win hands down?
I would give the slaying to Sissy Spacek just because it was like, you better act. Like, that's what I would
Because
think.
of the
Like,
slap?
the slap was just
The
so,
breaking the plate. Yeah.
yeah, like, I think the easy answer is to give it to Nicole Kidman. Nicole Kidman's just never given you,
Yeah.
like, oh, I'm slaying right now. Not once. That's me.
Wow. Damn. Okay. Shots fired.
I love Nicole
Yeah.
Kidman. Do I? I don't know.
No, you don't. Please be honest. That's okay. All right. Hi Girls, Hi Louise, and Ben Roberts both want to know, should Nicole Kidman have been nominated for Moulin Rouge or the others?
I love a horror nomination.
Yeah.
I love a horror suspense ghost thriller nomination. There are far too few. So that would have been really cool and would have made this an even
Yeah.
better lineup.
Yeah, I actually prefer the others in terms of performance from her, and horror bias is definitely a thing, and there's a reason that she's not nominated, and that's probably a big part of it. But obviously, voters loved Moulin Rouge, so that was always going to be the one. But Cody Derricks wants to know if actors are allowed to get two nominations in the same category, does Nicole get nominated for the others as well?
I don't think so because of the genre bias.
Yeah, I would agree. Chels said Moulin Rouge was a drag race rusical. What other film would you want to see drag queens perform from this group, I guess?
From this group, I mean, Bridget Jones is the easy answer,
Yeah.
but I personally would want to see the Monsters Ball one just because I'm like,
Oh boy.
what,
That
what would that be?
yeah. Yeah. There's a camp element to it that I think they could yeah, definitely. I think any of these except like Iris you could have fun with.
I think there's a world in which you have fun with Iris. I don't know what that world is. Out of curiosity, I want to see it though.
Yes, yes. Joey Gentili said Baz famously said the role of Satine came between Courtney Love, who is fire, and Nicole Kidman, who is ice. As someone who feels Kidman was wildly miscast and Love was robbed, how does this lineup play out if Courtney Love is here instead?
Courtney Love never would have got a nomination. Like I don't see the Academy nominating Courtney Love if they refuse to nominate the Queen of Pop, Madonna. Like I don't quiet
Fair
as
point.
it's kept, I was kind of wanting Madonna to do this movie. I was kind of wanting Sharon
Yeah.
Stone to do this movie.
Oh boy. Yeah. Oh my god.
I don't think Courtney Love would have got a nomination if Madonna didn't get a nomination. I just can't, that would have been really disrespectful to be like, oh, Courtney Love, we're going to nominate you. I don't think she was taken seriously. She's still a polarizing figure. She was
Yeah.
just talking shit about Taylor Swift and Beyonce the other day. So
Yeah.
she wouldn't have
Courtney's gonna
campaigned.
be Courtney. No.
No
Yeah.
campaign.
Yeah. That would be tricky. And she didn't even get in for the People versus Larry Flint, which she probably came closer to than people might imagine of getting a nomination.
Very
Um,
talented.
yeah. Jeffrey Kerr said, had Moulin Rouge been released in 2000 as it was originally supposed to, would Nicole Kidman have received a nomination for the others this year? Or would genre bias have prevented that from happening? Yeah, probably still a little bit more genre bias. I would have to think a little bit for who would replace if there's no Moulin Rouge this year. I do wonder who might replace her, if not herself, for the others.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a hard question.
Yeah, because it
I'm
feels
not
like it was
sure.
always these five. Yeah,
It just makes sense
so
for it to be these five.
yeah, yeah.
What was Meryl Streep
Um,
doing in 2001?
I don't think she had any movies. I think she had like a voice in AI, but that was it.
They probably would have nominated her even for that.
Fair. Humphrey Fogart said Kidman had a remarkable year with Moulin Rouge and the others. Do you think if the films came out in separate years, she would have been nominated for both? Again, maybe. I mean, I think like 2002 is tough. I don't think she breaks in that year, but maybe 2000.
Maybe I just hate that they're so anti genre, because
I
I
know.
love so many performances in this vein, but I just
Hmm.
don't imagine it happening in any context, no matter what. Like we could say like
Yeah.
these different scenarios. I wish.
Lila said Moulin Rouge was loosely based on the French novel La Dame aux Camélias, which had been famously adapted into the 1936 film starring Greta Garbo. Put Greta Garbo in a Nicole Kidman role of your choosing.
Imagine Greta Garbo and John Gilbert in Eyes Wide Shut. Like in a version
Wow. Wow, you had that one to go.
in a version of that somehow could have been made pre-code, putting their relationship on display, the masks.
I
Um,
love that answer.
Maybe like Fritz Lang does it. If it's silence, that would be cool. So we could call Murnau to do it.
Wow. I was not expecting that. Like, this is really coming together.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I was going to say put Greta Garbo in Birth.
I haven't seen that one.
That is wild one. I'll just say that.
I love this
So,
question.
yes. Miles McHale said, "Everyone says what should it have been for Nicole, The Others, or Moulin Rouge? But what of her third film in 2001, Birthday Girl? Should her mail order bride crime thriller have secured a nomination?"
Oh, I haven't seen that either, so.
Neither have I, so I can't answer that. But sounds fun. Jimmy said, rearrange these Oscar nominated actresses in each other's musical films. Nicole Kidman in Moulin Rouge, Liza Minnelli in Cabaret, Julie Andrews in Mary Poppins, Debbie Reynolds in The Unsinkable Molly Brown, and Deborah Carr in The King and I.
Okay. Um, I I definitely think that Debbie Reynolds would be a good Mary Poppins.
Yeah, that could easily work for her.
Absolutely. Um, I think that I could see Liza and Nicole switching very easily. I could see Liza doing a version of Moulin Rouge. Imagine like
Mhm.
it's 1976 and Ken Russell calls Liza like, let's do this concept. And she would just be like, yes, darling, yes. So I could see that.
Sounds divine.
I could very much see her doing a version of Moulin Rouge. Julie
Hmm.
Andrews, I guess, in Unsinkable Molly Brown. Um,
Sure.
what are the last two?
Deborah Carr, and I think for what you said, that's it. so,
Oh,
I,
okay.
so that's tricky because there's The King and I, which is Deborah Carr.
That
I'll
is
just tell you what I
tricky.
came up with because I came up with something entirely different, even though I really like where yours are going. Um, so I said Deborah Carr and Mary Poppins. I
Oh,
think
that's
she
great.
very easily could do that. Yeah. I said actually Debbie Reynolds in Moulin Rouge, which would be such a
Oh,
wild trip, but I think it would be fun. Nicole Kidman in Cabaret, I totally agree. Liza Minnelli, I'm putting in The Unsinkable Molly Brown. I think she could be plucky and fun and wild. And then I put Julie Andrews in The King and I.
oh yeah, I like yours better than mine.
I really love, though, Liza Minnelli being in Moulin Rouge, though. I think that should have happened, and I'm mad that you put that into the world and I can't have it.
We can have it in our minds.
Yes, yes, I can live in my delusional world where that happened. Okay, Fritz said, was Sissy's dominance with the critics a disadvantage, as her performance was very quiet and small, leading many Oscar voters to wonder what the big deal was?
Yes, in the sense that she peaked way too early and in the
Mm-hmm.
bedroom didn't really have the momentum that it needed to keep that heat. And correct me if I'm wrong, in the bedroom is out of Sundance, correct?
Yeah, I think it was one of those that really lasted the whole year.
That's a
Yep.
long time to keep
Mm-hmm.
up that momentum. It does not always happen. Every now and
Right.
again it does, but it's very hard. So I feel like she just peaked way too early. So she was at a disadvantage in that way, to be sure. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I would say just in general, this tends to happen, honestly, where critics really, really praise a performance that is not maybe the super duper obvious, like, showboating kind of performance that, once the industry is watching it, it's like, okay. It's kind of like when critics like really went overboard with Cody Smith McPhee for The Power of the Dog, and then the industry was like, a little too quiet for me. We'll go with Troy Kotzer. So that can happen. Plus,
Absolutely.
her not
And
always being the focus of her film.
right, absolutely. And on top of that, it's not the flashiest performance. She is
Right.
quiet through a lot of it. So I feel like unfortunately people couldn't appreciate that.
Christoph said, what is your favorite Oscar-nominated slap? Sissy Spacek slapping Marissa Tomei, Cher slapping Nick Cage in Moonstruck, Ruby Dee slapping Denzel Washington, one I'm not thinking of at the moment.
Oh,
All
it's
good.
Mildred Pierce.
Thank you. Thank you.
Both of
The old
them.
school. Yeah, actually.
Both of them. My car is named Joan Crawford, by the way.
Well, you're in fine company here. I love it. Yes. That's honestly the perfect answer. But a close second would be Cher slapping Nick Cage. I mean, that's the moment she won when she told him to snap out of it. So there you go. Ethan David said, which Best Actress winner would you have liked to have seen smash a plate?
Just
Joan
ever.
Crawford.
Joan Crawford doing it would be awesome. I love Sharon Stone doing anything, so her smashing a plate would have been great. Liza Minnelli smashing a plate would have been Judy Garland smashing a plate. Like,
Oh,
need I go on?
yeah. Okay. 3 people had the same question. Andrew Carden, Matt Stillman, and Cowboy Bruno. They all want to know if Sissy wins this, if she hadn't already won for Coal Miner's Daughter.
I don't know. I still think it's too quiet. I think it's
Mm-hmm.
too outside of the wheelhouse of what was winning at this time. I mean, the big transformative performances were winning. It's not as outwardly transformative, even though I would argue it is transformative from what I know her to be. I don't know. I think certainly I would not have been mad at her winning. She should have won to me for Carrie, but Coal Miner's Daughter, of course, she won for that. It's such a baby role. I don't know if her overdue narrative would have been large enough because Sissy Spacek is not necessarily like a celebrity who can
Right.
like carry that overdue narrative like a Brad Pitt and get that like finally win. I don't know. Maybe.
I agree. Yeah. I think it would have been tough. I mean, I think it would have been closer if she hadn't won already. But it's a kind of thing of we have competing narratives within the same Best Actress race, and I still think Halle Berry comes out on top.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then maybe Sissy Spacek never wins an Oscar.
That would
And
be
how
so
sad that would be.
sad. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, on that note, Andrew Carden and Christoph and Cowboy Bruno and many others want me to rank Sissy Spacek's nominations. All 6. Okay. Have you seen all 6 of her nominations?
I've only seen 3.
That's okay. Most people have only seen the main 3, so that's okay. I'll just give mine. My number 1 is actually still Carrie. I think that is just iconic work. I know I don't have to make that argument to you. Number 2, I would say In the Bedroom. So I think her first and last are her peak. Number 3 for me, very close, would be Coal Miner's Daughter. Number 4 would be Missing. Number 5 would be Crimes of the Heart. And number 6 would be The River, which I barely remember as a performance. All due respect. So, do you have a ranking of your 3 that you've seen?
Sure. Well, number 1 is Carrie because wow, that
Yeah.
is just so incredible. She should have been nominated for Badlands to me as well.
Yeah.
She was brilliant in that, but Carrie number 1 by a country mile. And then number 2, um, this is hard. I guess Coal Miner's Daughter because it's just such a true blue Oscar win. It makes sense. I love the movie. It elevates what could have been just stale biopic. She did her own singing. That's a classic. And In the Bedroom, even though I think it is just great as well.
Steve, no, not that Steve. The other one said was part of how Zellweger got her nomination due to Academy members and everyone else being surprised at how well she played being British. Would a British actress have also been recognized if they had played the role?
Maybe. It's interesting. I do think that that is a big part of this. She was
Yeah.
transforming. That adds an edge to it that, not every romantic comedy performance has. So I definitely think that her convincing us that she was British, her gaining the weight, her smoking, her doing all of these transformative things to prepare. That definitely was campaign fodder for her.
Yeah, I agree. And I would actually go so far as to say if a British actress is in this role, depending on who it is, I guess, I don't think this is a nomination. I would
Mhm.
say that. Cyan Kelly said, do you think that Renee's nomination has anything to do with her failure to get nominated for Nurse Betty? I mean, sort of. I think just her growing reputation helped her in that respect.
Yeah, I think that it had been a slow boil for several
Right.
years. And I think that this
Yeah.
nomination is a peak. I think that she had been making the waves since Jerry Maguire, and I think that she'd been putting in consistently good work in everything that she did. You know, she elevated Texas Chainsaw, right? I think that
Yeah.
it was just a build, and it made sense at that time because this movie was a hit.
Right. Exactly. Ben Roberts actually said Helena Bonham Carter, Kate Blanchett, Emily Watson, and Toni Collette were considered for or offered the role of Bridget Jones. Who would you have considered the best fit for the role?
Kate Blanchett. She can do
That would
anything.
be wild. That's true. This is
She
true.
can do anything. And I
I
would like to see that.
yeah, at that time especially would have been really fun. I would actually say Emily Watson would be really cool to see in that kind of a role. Something a little lighter than Breaking the Waves and Hillary and Jackie that I've just watched, and I'm just like, oh my god, something funny, please. Luckily, we had Punch Drunk Love in 2002, but still. Zoe G and The Ghost of Glenda Miss Jackson, if you nasty, want to know if there are other modern rom coms that we feel should have had their leading lady, like Renee, honored with a nomination.
I mean, I'm not gonna say Sydney Sweeney.
Not so
um,
much.
I
Yeah,
guess, you know, there was a world in which Constance Wu could have gotten in for Crazy Rich Asians, or, you know, I would have loved a supporting nomination for Michelle Yeoh there.
Michelle.
That would
Yep.
have been great.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know how modern this is anymore, but I would say Emma Stone in Easy A
Yeah.
is another one. And I don't know if this fully counts as like rom com necessarily, but like Kristen Wiig, I think was phenomenal in Bridesmaids. I feel like that
Yes.
would have been a fantastic nomination. And 2011 had room.
Yes. I would like to see
We'll
that.
get to it. Yes, yes. Joan Waters said, if these films were remade today, who would you cast in these roles?
I feel like it would be interesting to see Emma Thompson do Iris.
I thought of that too. Yeah.
That would be really different for her and really cool.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I
Mm-hmm.
think that Zendaya in Monsters Ball would happen.
Ooh.
if
Yeah.
if the movie
And there
were
would be
made.
discourse.
Yeah, and I like to call her Halle Berry's replacement jokingly because she sort of fills that spot. So I think Halle Berry's
Yeah.
replacement would be in Monsters Ball. No one can replace Halle Berry.
Wow.
Um,
Yeah.
I think that for Bridget Jones, that is so hard, right? I would love to see Emma Stone do it or Jennifer Lawrence. I think they're the right age.
Hmm. Yeah. And the
Um,
right sort of temperament, the comedy chops. Yeah.
Absolutely. I would love to see Emma Stone in Moulin Rouge. I would love to see Margot Robbie in Moulin Rouge or in
Yeah.
anything.
That's a good call.
She's
Yeah.
my girl crush.
And also the only Australian you like, as we've established. Uh,
LOL.
first of all, don't remake Monsters Ball. I'll just say that. Just don't remake it. But yeah, Zendaya makes sense. I also thought of like a Teyana Paris as a possibility. I enjoy her. For Iris, I definitely thought of Imelda Staunton. Just makes sense on paper. I mean, Moulin Rouge, I think that's like open to anyone, you know? And I think Margot Robbie makes sense, even though that's such a basic answer when I'm doing recasting questions. But for this specifically, I think it could work. For In the Bedroom, I went with Laura Linney.
That would be
Yeah,
interesting. I don't know who I
yeah.
would put in that. That would be really, really fascinating.
Yeah,
Because it's an older woman. I'm thinking of Julia Roberts would be interesting.
for sure. That would be really cool to see her in something like that. And for Bridget Jones's Diary, I'm gonna say Nicola Coughlan from Bridgerton.
Hmm. Interesting
Yeah,
choices there.
thank you. Yeah. Okay, Chelsea wants to do our obligatory survivor question. So, who wins from this group of characters? Who dominates challenges? Who has the best social game, best strategy? Who would you want on your tribe?
I would not want Bridget Jones on my tribe. At all.
Yeah, she's a little clumsy.
Or Iris because of obvious. Should she be on
Yeah,
Survivor?
I don't think she would pass the health exam, so I don't think that could work.
We're terrible. Oh my god.
It's, I mean, really though.
Yeah,
um,
so that's maybe Sissy Spacek. She was giving, top energy in the bedroom. So I guess.
yeah, I feel like she could argue for herself and advocate for herself in the end for why people should vote for her to win. But look, I think Bridget Jones would have a good social game. I would say that. I think she would make friends easily. So that's something. Satine, again, I don't know if she passes the health check, but that's tough. Letitia, I could see doing well in challenges compared to the rest of this group. Because, like, it's not a picture of physical fitness otherwise. I don't know. Just saying.
Yeah. I don't know.
We'll leave it at that.
That.
John Anzalone said, do we think that Audrey Tautou from Amelie was 6th in the rankings?
Was that Best Picture nominated?
No. But I got like 5 nominations, so
there's a world in which I could see that.
maybe. It's a solid bet. Celluloid Siren said, Isabelle Huppert for The Piano Teacher and Naomi Watts for Mulholland Drive are some of the most critically acclaimed performances from this decade. Would you have nominated them this year, and who would they replace? Well, just to clarify, The Piano Teacher was not eligible for a nomination for Isabelle Huppert, so even if we wanted it to happen, it couldn't have. That's what makes this a little tricky. Obviously, it's an iconic performance, one of her best. That, if she was eligible, plus Naomi Watts, which is actually my favorite lead actress performance of the whole year. Mm-hmm. Yes, I would replace. Who would I replace from this group, though? That's really tough.
I personally would replace Nicole Kidman with Naomi.
Yeah.
Me personally, but it's hard because that's so iconic, and I don't know if that would have happened. So if we're talking real life and not just what Isaiah wants, I think that she might have replaced. Judi Dench was on the nomination streak. I think she would have probably replaced Renée Zellweger, unfortunately.
Yeah. Okay, one last question from Joey Gentili. Recast these 2000s Oscar talents
and Karen Black.
I know that's right. In the roles above. So Karen, Melissa Leo, Kate Hudson, Jennifer Hudson, and Taraji P. Henson. What a wild group we've assembled for this week, Joey. I don't know any of these people who could work for Bridget Jones, but you know what I landed on for this? And somehow I could make it work. Jennifer Hudson.
I was thinking that. I was kind of thinking that.
Yeah. Put on a little cheeky little British accent and yeah, why not?
That would be fun.
Kate Hudson in Moulin Rouge. Taraji P. Henson in Monsters Ball.
That's probably, I bet you she auditioned. I bet you, because they're contemporaries, I bet you money that her name was in there somewhere.
Yeah. And then Karen Black.
Melissa Leo.
In the bedroom.
Oh. That would be interesting. Maybe. I can't really picture it, but it would be interesting.
Yeah, I can't picture Karen Black in any of these this year, but in the bedroom, why not? And Melissa Leo, we're putting in Iris. Sorry, Melissa.
Yeah.
We don't have a lot of great options here for Iris.
I think Karen Black and Iris would be interesting too.
Okay. Melissa Leo and in the bedroom, I bet she would ham it up.
Yeah. That's the only difference between mine and yours.
Yeah, I like that. Yeah. Okay, well, we're here at our final segment now, where we will reveal who we think was the runner-up of this Best Actress race. Isaiah, who do you think it was?
I'm gonna say Sissy Spacek. I'm not
Yep.
entirely confident in that because I do think that Judi Dench's movie had wins in other areas. So, and she had not one lead. So there's a world in which that happens. But I think Sissy
Hmm.
Spacek had the stronger movie. It had the Best Picture nomination. It had the critical acclaim. She did win, a couple major precursors. So that's the best answer I can think of.
Yeah, I definitely agree. This was Sissy Spacek as the runner-up here. She had all that critic support. She had the early frontrunner status. She was in a film nominated for Best Picture. It would have been the only place to reward in the bedroom of its nominations, which it ultimately went home empty-handed. But yeah, I think it just makes a lot of sense, especially for, maybe older members of the Academy to rally behind Sissy of this group, considering Judi had just won so recently. So yeah, makes a lot of sense that Sissy would be the runner-up here. Now, the fun question is, who would you have voted for from this lineup?
Renee Zellweger.
Ooh, we don't get that answer very much from this group. I love that. Tell me why.
It was so fun. I just love that she's here. And I just want to correct these Oscar wins. Like when I was watching Fritz's video about like underrated Oscar wins, and then he tried to convince me that Renee Zellweger's wins were like somehow salvageable. I was like, girl, come on. Like, I love
We love you, Fritz.
I love the wild opinions though, but I would have liked for her to have an Oscar for this as opposed to like her other wins. Like in all fun, and we're having so much fun. I mean, I would definitely love because my thing is like if y'all gave it to Judy Holliday for whatever that was in, in
Excuse me.
1950,
Not whatever that was.
I'll tell you what it was. It was
And she did it very well.
oh my goodness. I would have loved to see her win, but I can't take it away from Halle Berry. I am biased. I like that Halle Berry has won. I like that a black woman has won, but Renee Zellweger is who I would have voted for.
I love that. Well, I also respect Hallie's win, but I would have voted for Sissy Spacek here. I think that tracks with what most people would think in my taste. And actually, now that I look back on it, this would be the only time that I reward Sissy Spacek with an Oscar because I did not give it to her for Coal Miner's Daughter. I gave that to Mary Tyler Moore, of course, for Ordinary People. This is perfectly matching with similar reasons, I guess. I just find her devastating and shattering, and she's switching up so much of what we knew of Sissy Spacek up to that point. And even though it's sort of borderline supporting, I think she has such impact that I don't even care. So
Yeah.
that's my winner.
I would not have been mad at Sissy Spacek's name being called. She was brilliant in that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Isaiah, for this super fun, super in-depth conversation about 2001. I had a great time. So thank you.
I did too, and I hope one day to come back on. This is a dream come true. I'm a fan, and
Yeah.
this was great.
Yes. Thank you so much. Where can people find more of you on the internet if you wish to be found?
Yeah, you can follow me on Instagram at Isaiah Reaves. That's my handle, ISAIAHMIKELREAV as in Victor ES.
Very good. And thank you all so much for listening. You can find me at Kevin_Jacobson on all platforms, Instagram at And the Runner Up Is. Rate, review, and subscribe if you haven't already. And if you like what you heard and want to hear more, go to patreon.com/And the Runner Up Is for a whole bunch of bonus episodes. Next week, we'll be breaking down the Best Actress lineup of 2002, where the nominees were Salma Hayek in Frida, Nicole Kidman in The Hours, Diane Lane in Unfaithful, Julianne Moore in Far From Heaven, and Renée Zellweger in Chicago, with the winner being Nicole Kidman. So with that, thanks again, Isaiah.
Thank you.
And I will bid you all adieu.